All of Newburgh knew that Hiccup Haddock was long-winded, but this was long even for him. Or maybe it just felt that way because Zephyr was incredibly aware of the weight of the coming words. She realized he paused for a moment, and Zephyr almost bolted out of the hole right then. She could do it. She could just run away, hide in the tunnels below the island and evade any search party they sent after her. She could do it. She knew those tunnels better than anyone else on the entirety of Newburgh. But then Hiccup squeezed her shoulders and gently kissed the crown of her head. I knew you could do this from the moment you could walk. He believed in her. He knew her better than anyone. He had raised her, made her into the girl, the woman, she was. He always told her time and time again that he was proud of her. And he has always had faith in her. He only ever wanted the best for her, and he would never ask her to do something he knew she couldn't handle. She needed to have faith in his decision. So as she felt him take a step back, his hands falling away from her shoulders, Zephyr set her face like she did earlier in the reflecting glass. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and readied herself for whatever was about to come for her. Her father took a deep breath himself. Newburgh and our honored allies and guests, I present to you, Zephyr Stoic Haddock, firstborn to Hiccup Horrendous III and Astrid Haddock, heir to the chiefdom of Newburgh. Zephyr expected a lot of shouting, maybe some shocked gossip, definitely arguments erupting around them. What she never expected was the cold, empty silence that swept across every soul in the room. She was just as shocked as they were. She didn't know how to react. Even Hiccup stood speechless behind her. She heard someone clear his throat suddenly. Long live the chiefess. She turned to find Eason holding his cup above his head as a shaky and half-empty chorus of Long live the chiefess echoed across the hall. He smiled half-heartedly at her, and held his cup up towards her before taking a drink. The noise must have shaken her father back to life. He stepped up beside her and put his arm around her, as if protecting her from the shaken stares of the crowd. Aha, yes. So please, feast and drink and celebrate with me and my family, my beautiful daughter's 14th birthday. May she have many more, and many happy years ahead. The room slowly came back to life as the guests turned back to their food and drink, but they seemed more cautious than before. Zephyr could only imagine the kind of turn their conversations had taken. Zephyr, darling, I am so sorry. Hiccup started to apologize in her ear. Dad, it's fine, she quickly reassured him. I wasn't exactly expecting roaring applause, to be honest. She smiled at him as best as she could. I'm okay. Maybe not roaring applause, but something would have been nice, her father muttered. He looked down at her before pulling her into a real embrace. Are you sure you're all right? Positive, she said, happy she didn't have to look him in the eye and betray what she was really feeling. She pulled away and sighed. I'm going to go see Aunt Heather. Zephyr, Astrid said, leaning around Hiccup with Willow in her lap. Are you sure you're okay? Yes, Mom, I'm fine. I just want to see Aunt Heather, she wasn't there on Old Burke. Her mother gave her a concerned look but didn't object. Zephyr took the opportunity to leave before she decided to say anything else. She had every intention of actually going over to see Heather, but once she started walking away, she felt the same tightening in her chest as before. She could feel the fear rising in her throat, overwhelming her head. No. She shoved the feeling down. Not tonight. Though it became harder and harder to do as she moved through the crowd, not really sure where she was headed to. She tried not to notice how everyone she passed glanced at her from the corners of their eyes and lowered their voices. How the crowd literally split as she walked through it. Some gave disgusted glares, some simply looked on in confusion or curiosity. She couldn't help but notice that no one was particularly happy, though. She found herself at the edge of the room when she heard two men talking loudly amongst themselves. When she heard Nuffink's name, she slipped behind one of the large pillars nearby. Determined, headstrong, loyal, he'd make a great chief. I wonder why they chose Zephyr. She wouldn't do a bad job, would she? No, I don't think so. I just worry no one will take her seriously. Especially as a youngin'. I'm sure Hiccup thought through that. I agree, but that doesn't mean it'll be easy for her. I'm just saying, Nuffink would have been a smoother transition. She sighed. Well, it was nice to hear someone outside of council believed she had the ability, at least. Even if they didn't think she was the right choice. She turned, planning to find Heather again. She gasped and jumped back, hand over her racing heart. Eason. For sake, announce yourself next time or something. Eason chuckled nervously from inches away, rubbing the back of his neck with his hand. Hey, yeah, Dad says I'm really bad with that, too. He glanced back at her. How are you doing? I'm fine, Zephyr replied too quickly and too harshly. Eason raised his eyebrows. She hated when he did that. I'm sure you are. She crossed her arms and stared him down. He melted into a smile and shook his head. Zephyr, I'm a friend, remember. You can't pretend you aren't hearing what everyone is saying when I literally caught you eavesdropping. She stood her ground for a moment longer, but eventually sighed, dropping her arms and scrubbing her face. It's fine. It's nothing we didn't expect. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you should have to put up with it, he said, voice soft and understanding. Zephyr ignored how the sound of his words made her heart ache to feel his arms around her again, to chase away the bad feeling like he did on the cliffside. She hugged her own waist instead of leaning towards him like her body wanted to do. I'll have to get used to it, won't I? She weakly argued. Eason pursed his lips as he searched her face. Do you want to step outside? She was a little taken aback. I mean, this party is for me. I should probably stay and... What, mingle with your adoring fans, he joked, though the warmth in his amber eyes shaved off any edge to his words. The party has already spread outside. There's plenty of people out there who need your attention too. She bit her lip and scanned the room. She was already hiding in a corner. And no one was exactly looking for her. When she turned back to Eason, she found his hand extended to her. Come on. Besides, there's something I want to show you. Her eyes flickered down to his hand and back up to his eyes again. He gave her a shy, pleading smile. Can you trust me for once? He said for once as if they've been locked in this battle of wits for years on end, rather than having only had the one encounter on Old Burke. But the guy was just so damn persistent that it sure felt like years. It wasn't that she didn't want to trust him. She just didn't give in that easy. And the fact that he wanted her to just give in, just like that, would normally make her shut down. Normally. So why didn't he make her want to shut down? She searched his eyes, his face, his body language, anything for some type of sign that he wanted to betray her. That he just wanted to get something out of her and use it against her or her tribe in some way. That he really just wanted to hurt her in one way or another, and this friendly routine was just an act, a means to an end. But she couldn't find it. All she found was genuine kindness, some concern, a warm softness. Maybe it was that kindness. Maybe it was the interest in whatever it was he wanted to show her. Maybe it was just the need to get away from the hole for a bit, and he was a convenient excuse. Whatever it was that swayed her, she found herself slipping her hand into his. Okay. Chapter 9, New Alliance. Notes. And with a record-breaking, for me, at least, 7K work chapter, we're going to jump right back in from where we left off last week. Many thank yous to everyone who commented on the last chapter here and on FF and Tumblr, I appreciate every single one of you. And of course many thanks to my lovely beta for putting up with my crap and my procrastination lol. Chapter text. Eason was typically a very calm person, at least in the times that Zephyr had seen him. He seemed to carry all of his emotion in his eyes and his smile rather than in his general physique. But as soon as Zephyr slipped her hand in his and whispered, okay, his eyes lit up like she'd never seen before. He straightened his back, smiled wide enough to split his face open, and practically pranced out of the hole while dragging her along like a child with a new toy. Zephyr couldn't help but giggle at his burst of excitement, which made him turn back to her and somehow smile wider. He led her out of the hole and into the chilly air, dodging between guests that shot them curious looks. Eason, slow down. Zephyr cried, embarrassed but somehow still smiling. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. He slowed down to a hurried walk as they weaved through the dancing crowd outside, and started heading for the trees. Zephyr pulled back. Eason. It's okay, he said, turning back to smile softly at her again. We're not going far, I promise. You'll still be able to see the crowd. He stopped, despite the insistence in his voice, and waited patiently. Waited patiently for her permission, she realized. Can you trust me for once? Well, she did say she would. And he didn't seem to be pushing her. She slowly nodded her head. Okay. He smiled and let go of her hand, stepping into the trees and waving at her to follow. His smile was intoxicating when he saw her enter the forest after him. I want you to meet someone really special to me, he said, turning to her. Before Zephyr could ponder what that meant, he whistled loudly and held out his arm. She heard rustling in the trees behind him, and she thought about running for a moment. But he still stood calmly in front of her, smiling like nothing was wrong. Suddenly, a large white bird speckled with brown burst silently through the trees and circled above them once before landing gracefully on Eason's raised arm. Zephyr realized her mouth was hanging open in awe when Eason blushed and smiled shyly at her. Zephyr, meet Orboda. I call her Bodhi for short. Zephyr stuttered, but eventually spit out, is that a Geoforcan? Yes, she is, he smiled proudly. Zephyr laughed in disbelief. And you trained her? He nodded. She's really gentle. You can come pet her. She loves head scratches. Zephyr took a hesitant step forward. But Eason nodded and waved her over with his free hand, and she couldn't hold in her excitement anymore. She jogged forward, slowing when Orboda looked at her curiously and ruffled her feathers. Her eyes flickered between Eason and his bird, finding strength in his encouraging smile and actually enjoying the feeling it gave her, as she slowly lifted her hand to scratch Orboda's head. Orboda happily leaned into the gesture, ruffling her feathers again and pushing her head against Zephyr's palm. When I was 10, Eason started quietly, people around the island were being very vocal about what they thought of me and the rumors about who my parents really were. Which, to be fair, they might have been like that before, but that was when I really noticed it. I was really upset about it, so my dad took me on my first sailing trip. Zephyr listened, keeping her eyes on Orboda. We didn't go far. He said he wanted to teach me how to sail and properly build camp, but I know he was just trying to give me some time away from everyone. We took his little personal ship. We would sail for the day and then pick a nearby island to camp on for the night. Eason chuckled to himself. We must have just gone in a big circle, because it seemed like we were sailing further and further away from Outcast without turning back. But a week later, we were home. On the third day in, we got to the next island really early. Dad told me to go with him into the woods to gather some firewood instead of asking me to stay back and fish. There was this cliffside back in the trees, and I could hear a bird chirping. I found Orboda on the ground with a broken leg and a torn-up wing. I could see the nest she must have fallen from, but it was empty. So I picked her up and ran her to Dad. He said she looked like she must have just learned to fly based on how young she looked, and that she was probably abandoned when she was injured. Dad told me to leave her, but I wouldn't. I literally stomped off to the ship with her in my arms, he laughed. Dad acted mad, but he told me later that he never saw so much of my mom in me. So he helped me patch her up. He told me it was best to let her go, so I did when she was better. She would fly off, but she always came back. Dad would always yell at me for keeping her around, and I would have to try to tell him that she just came back on her own. He chuckled and shrugged. He believed me after he watched me let her go and she showed back up a few days later. And from then on he never said another word about it. Eason was quiet after that, and Zephyr looked up to find him lovingly watching Orboda enjoying the attention. That's really sweet, she said quietly. Eason blushed. Thanks. So after she kept going and coming back, I started training her to carry letters. Zephyr blinked. Wait, what? Yeah, Eason thought for a moment, like even he didn't expect the change of subject. Dad told me about the terror mail your dad started, and how it worked so well because the terrible terrors always flew back to their home. Well, Bodhi had the home part down already, so I just had to teach her where to go. She takes letters to Berserker Island regularly now. And, Eason pulled a small black package from his furs. Now to New Berk. That's incredible. How did you teach her to do that? Zephyr tried to remember to hold her jaw shut this time. She knows where to go by the color of the leather. Outcast is just regular leather, that way if something happens to the covers you don't have to worry about trying to dye it right to send her back. Berserker Island is purple, like the Skrill, which was Dager's family's insignia. Newburgh is black. Like a night fury, for my dad. Zephyr smiled. He was keeping the dragon stories alive. And for you, I'm guessing. Night Fury black and Nadar blue. He was obviously proud of himself for making the connection. Zephyr replied with a sly smile as she crossed her arms over her chest. Though she couldn't ignore how glad she was that Alvin had obviously told him all about the dragons. Pleased with himself, he started to walk backwards away from her. Stay there, I'll show you. As he moved, Orboda took off from his arm and landed on a low branch nearby, which apparently reminded Ethan of something. He turned around and took off one of his arm warmers to toss it to her. You might want to put that on your strong arm. Unless you're hiding extra cloth under those sleeves, he added with a smile. Zephyr watched him whistle for Orboda again as he crossed the small clearing and placed the arm warmer on her left forearm suspiciously. When he turned, he requested, hold out your arm, like I am. She obeyed, suddenly following his train of thought and growing excited again. He smiled and held the black painted leather up in front of Orboda's face, and then pointed to Zephyr. Newburgh, Bodhi. Take this to Zephyr. He then slipped it over her head and under her wing on one side, tightening it with one hand until it hung snugly across her body, but loose enough that she could fly and move easily. Newburgh, he repeated, and gave her a lift. Orboda took off and circled around a few times, cried out once, and sailed gracefully down to land on Zephyr's arm as if it were the millionth time she'd done it. Zephyr was surprised by how light she was still heavy enough to make Zephyr's arm tired after a while, but she wasn't terribly solid either. Zephyr laughed in disbelief again. That's incredible. How did she learn that so fast? Ethan chuckled. Trust me, it took me a few years to get it right with Berserker Island. I think she just recognized the pattern. I spent the whole sailing trip training her to recognize the black leather. Now I just have to see if she can get from Outcast to here on her own. That's amazing. Zephyr scratched Bodhi's head. Such a smart girl. She really is. Zephyr saw Ethan bite his lip out of the corner of her eye. So, when you want to send her back, you just switch which leather is on the outside and wrap it all up. That's so neat. Zephyr said, still scratching Orboda's head. Ethan laughed nervously. No, go ahead and try it now. Oh, okay. Odd, hadn't he said she had that part down? Zephyr loosened the tie and carefully slipped it off of Orboda, prompting her to take off and perch in a nearby tree to preen herself. Zephyr rolled out the leather, immediately noticing the plain brown leather neatly rolled up with the black. But then something fell into her hand. A long, deep blue gem hanging from thin strips of black leather. Ethan, what's? It's for you. She looked up to find his cheeks blushed under his scruff. I saw the colors on your bag back on Old Burke. I know it's not quite the same blue color, but that's what I could find with the time I had. So, happy birthday. Zephyr didn't know what to say. Orboda swooped back down and gently tugged the leather covers from her hand, and she still wasn't able to say a word. She soared back to Ethan and dropped the leather in his hand, but Zephyr still stayed silent, frozen with the necklace in her palm. Ethan turned worried. If it's too much. It's beautiful, Zephyr quickly choked. Thank you. Ethan started to step towards her. I should go. Zephyr stumbled backwards, talking quickly and not at all sure about what she was saying. I mean, back to the party. My party. Because, you know, it's for me, and I should. Probably. Be there. Ethan raised his eyebrows. Gods, she hated that. Thank you, she stuttered out again before running back into the village. She groaned, partially out of relief and partially frustration, once she was back under the cover of the crowd. Just when she thought that maybe he could be a good friend to rely on, he pulls this. The blue gem felt like it was burning a hole in her hand as she weaved through the crowd, not entirely sure where she was going. She sighed. Maybe that was too harsh. It was a nice gift. And that's all it was, a gift. Which wasn't entirely unusual given the circumstances. But it was a private gift, that he obviously orchestrated a nice little surprise for. That wasn't something that friends did. Was it? It was really sweet, though. Zephyr shook her head. No, don't even entertain that thought. She hated surprises anyway. She didn't have much of a chance to consider it either way. As she walked closer to the Great Hall, she saw Nothing, Tough Nut, and Dager snickering and sneaking, sort of, around the side of the structure. Oh, this ought to be good. Tilde tilde tilde. Nothing loved big village-wide celebrations. A lot. Definitely more than most people. Because big parties meant big crowds. And big crowds meant big distractions. And big distractions meant big opportunities for mischief. And, boy, was today a whole mess of big distractions. So much so that even Nothing wondered if maybe he should lie low for the night. Maybe. He was still considering. He watched Zephyr stand up and say she was going to see Aunt Heather, but he couldn't help noticing she walked around to the right side of the room. He turned his head, easily finding Aunt Heather sitting with Uncle Dager, Uncle Toughnut, Aunt Roughnut, and Uncle Fishlegs on the left side of the room. Mom and Dad of course didn't notice, as they were busy fighting with Grandma Valka. Absolutely ridiculous. I don't care who it is, when a successor is announced, the people should be grateful, she complained. Mom, please, Dad begged. Not now, all right. We knew this could happen, we'll deal with it later. So we're just going to let them run all over the poor girl. Grandma fought back, waving her arm in front of her to gesture to the whole room. We just need to give it time to sink in, Dad insisted quietly. Please, Mom, just let me handle this. Grandma looked at Dad, and then looked at Mom, raising her eyebrows. Mom shook her head slightly, prompting Grandma to roll her eyes and stand from the table. Mom, where are you going? Dad asked her. Please don't start any. Oh, hiccup, please, she stopped him, patting his shoulder. I'm just going to get a drink. She continued on her way, but Nothing heard her mutter under her breath, if I have to stand aside while my granddaughter is slandered, I might as well not remember it in the morning. Nothing snickered, and Grandma shot him a playful scowl over her shoulder. Nothing stood up and stole Grandma's seat next to Spro. Bubba, did you taste the yak? Spro asked excitedly. Grammy Runner really did a good job. Yeah, she did, Nothing said, distracted as he tried to listen in on what Mom and Dad were saying. What's wrong, Bubba? Spro tapped his shoulder. Nothing, Spees. Nothing smiled at his little brother and pointed across the room. Hey, look. Uncle Dager's already dancing. Spro's mouth opened wide as he followed Nothing's finger to find that Uncle Dager was in fact dancing very badly, and just in time to watch him jump up on the table. Nothing wrapped his arm around Spro as an excuse to lean closer to his parents. Not a good idea, asked, maybe we should have waited. Or maybe. Hiccup, it's done now. There wasn't any getting around it. But maybe your mom is right, maybe we should let the people who support Zephyr stand up for her. I just don't want fights to break out. I know, I don't either. But they are going to have to get used to it. Honestly, they should have seen it coming. And the sooner they realize we're not joking around about this, the better. Dad didn't respond after that, though Nothing thought he heard him sigh. It's not like it was when you started, love. Mom's voice was much softer, and Nothing strained to hear what she was saying. She still has her father here to guide her. We're in peaceful times. We're not recovering from a massive attack. This is good. This is better than we ever could have asked for her. There was a pause, and then Nothing heard his father say, yeah, maybe you're right. I always am. All right, no need to brag. Come here, Willow, let's let Mommy eat her dinner, yeah. Oh, don't be so excited to see Daddy. I'm fun too, you know. Spro patted Nothing's cheeks with both his hands. Bubba, Bubba. Look, look, look. Nothing didn't have much choice as Spro turned his head for him back towards Uncle Dager, sort of, who apparently fell off the table into Uncle Toughnut's arms. Spro was laughing hysterically at this. Nothing laughed along. It looked like he wasn't getting much else out of listening in on his parents anyway, who were now trying to feed Willow small bits of yak chops yet again unsuccessfully. It took a minute, but eventually Nothing was able to slip away, sneaking along the outside of the room. He started scanning across the crowd. Mom and Dad were still talking at the head table, but they looked like they were going to get up in a moment. Willow was getting antsy. Uncle Toughnut and Uncle Dago were dancing together now, but at least their feet were on the floor. Aunt Heather and Aunt Roughnut were talking at the table, but Nothing could tell they were trying to make sure no one was listening in on their words. No signs of Uncle Fishlegs, that's interesting. Oh, wait, no, there he was, over by the keg with Grandma Valka. Both with large tankards in their hands, oh boy. There was Zephyr trying to hide behind a pillar, talking to Ethan, Blick. Uncle Snotlout, where was Uncle Snotlout? Talking to Spitaloot. And getting angry. Oh boy, yep, he's starting to whisper yell at Spitaloot, that can't be good. A small hand tapped Nothing's shoulder, but he didn't react. So, what's the plan for tonight? Hey, Nutmeg, Nothing said. I haven't thought of one yet. Oh come on, she teased. This is the biggest party of the year. How have you not had a plan for weeks now? Nothing shrugged, a little uncomfortable. My parents and Zephyr have been really stressed about it. Nutmeg crossed her arms. What, so you felt too bad? Nothing shrugged again, face turning bright red. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't gonna make things worse for once. Nutmeg didn't say anything for a minute. It's okay to care about your sister, you know. Nothing rolled his eyes. I bet you 5 copper pieces Uncle Snotlout punches Spitaloot tonight. Nah. No way. Uncle Louty wouldn't punch his dad. Look, Nothing said, pointing to the father and son fighting across the way. We just finished dinner and they're already screaming at each other. Doesn't look like much screaming to me, Nutmeg muttered. Yet Nothing clarified, smiling deviously. What do you think they're fighting about? Nutmeg asked, sounding a little concerned. Who knows, it's Spitaloot. It could be anything. Where's your sister anyway? Over Nothing pointed to the side of the room Zephyr was standing last, but they were gone now. She was just over there talking to Ethan. Ethan? Alvin's son. Alvin. The outcast's chief. Nothing looked at Nutmeg. Your dad is the tribe ambassador. Nutmeg shrugged. I don't pay attention. Mom's job is cooler. Nothing chuckled. Come on, let's go mess with the Louts. Nutmeg scrunched her nose. Don't call them that, she said, following Nothing through the crowd. At first, Nothing was pretty singularly focused on the Jorgensons. But then he started to notice the pitiful glances people were throwing his way. People were patting his shoulder and saying, "It's okay, don't be too hard on yourself, they could always change their mind." He shot a bewildered look to Nutmeg behind him, who just shrugged unhelpfully. Unfortunately, it didn't stop once they reached Spitaloot. They hadn't even entirely walked up to the two before Spitaloot noticed Nothing and loudly announced, "Now there is a proper air." Spitaloot threw his arm around Nothing after he crossed the remaining space between them, and only then did Nothing realize what he said. Wait, what? This party should be for you, boyo. That's what I've been saying. Why would ye let them choose a daughter over you? Nothing stammered, but I don't want to be chief. I'm proud of Zephyr. For Spitaloot waved him off. Tha's just what they want ye to think. Dad, enough, Uncle Snotlout said, pushing his arm off of Nothing and pulling Nothing closer to him. Leave him alone, leave Zephyr alone, leave all of the Haddocks alone. This is their decision, and Hiccup isn't stupid. He knows his kids. Drop it. They tricked you too, did they? Spitaloot said, leaning in far too close to Snotlout's face. I think you need to stop drinking, and go home, Snotlout threatened in a low voice. The mead ain't the thing making me talk, boyo. It's the ridiculous decision, my idiot of a ch. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Snotlout spit, reaching his arm in front of Nothing and Nutmeg as if trying to shield them. Especially not in front of his kid. Hey, kids, why don't we go outside, Aunt Ruff said, suddenly standing behind Nuffink and Nutmeg. She quickly guided them away and back to the table she was seated at before. Nuffink looked back to find Uncle Snotlout shushing Spitaloot, trying to escort him out of the main room and into one of the tunnels. Mom and Dad were talking to Aunt Heather, but Mom looked like she was fuming. "Oh, when I get my hands on him." "Astrid, relax," Dad warned. "He has no right to speak to our son like that," she yelled. Dad put her arm around her, which Nuffink thought was a very bad idea. "I know, love, but you need to calm down. Sit down, please." "I will sit down. Right now, yes, that sounds like a great idea." Dad practically pushed her down onto the bench next to Aunt Heather, who chuckled and rubbed Mom's back. "It's all right, Astrid," she said. "I think Snotlout has this one handled for once." Astrid crossed her arms and mumbled something about what she would do if she wasn't pregnant and if no one was watching. Nuffink shivered. As funny as that would be to watch, he couldn't imagine anything she was thinking was pleasant. But then she saw Nuffink and Nutmeg walking up with Aunt Ruffnut. She straightened up and smiled. "Hey, sweetheart, are you guys having fun?" Nuffink nodded, but didn't say anything. He was suddenly very aware of all the eyes on him. He floated over to stand next to Mom, not really paying attention to what he was doing. She brushed his hair out of his face and hugged him close. "Nuff. You okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." She wasn't convinced. "Don't let Spitaloot get to you, okay? He's just a grumpy old man who's set in his ways." Nuffink nodded again. "Where's Willow and Spro?" Mom and Dad shared a look. Grandma Runner took them home. They were getting a little tired, Dad explained. "Oh," Nuffink said, not really sure what else to say. He wasn't sure why he asked in the first place. "You can go home too if you want," Mom said, straightening Nuffink's shirt. "No, it's okay. I still need to find Uncle Dager anyway." "Are you sure, Nuff?" Dad said. "You don't have to." "Yeah, I'm good, see you later." Nuffink ran off, dodging through the crowd and heading through the door. He took a hard right as he stepped outside, following the wall of the Great Hall to avoid the crowd and get to his favorite lookout spot. Until OOF. Nuffink had been running so fast he didn't even see the sheep in his way. He flipped over it as he ran into it, landing face first in the dirt. He sat up slowly and shook out his head, examining the sheep. He narrowed his eyes. "Oh, it's you." The sheep, Nuffink had named this particular sheep Yak Dung, didn't react. He continued chewing mindlessly on the grass. "What, Agnes, good vegetables aren't enough for you?" he sassed. Yak Dung didn't react. "I've got my eye on you," he threatened. Yak Dung didn't react. Nuffink shook his head and scoffed, scrambling to his feet. He started to walk off again, but then a large arm slung around his shoulder. The sheep ran off in surprise. "Nothing." Uncle Fishlegs cried. His breath reeked of ale. "Are you having fun?" Yeah, Uncle Fishlegs, it's great." He tried not to gag. Are you having fun?" "O' course I am. It's your sister's birthday." He sloshed a bit of ale onto Nuffink's arm. Nuffink laughed weakly. "Yeah, that's right." Uncle Fishlegs leaned in close, making Nuffink want to hold his breath. "But I'm scared, Nuff. I can't find my lucky sock." Nuffink's eyebrows scrunched together. "Lucky sock?" "Yeah." Fishlegs yelled, standing up straight. "I lost it." Nuffink tried to shake out the ringing in his ear. But then he got an idea. He looked around and found that stupid sheep still standing nearby. He smiled deviously. "You know what, Uncle Fishlegs," he said, committing to the act. He had Fishlegs' full attention. "Now that I think about it, I was just talking to that troll over there. See him?" Nuffink pointed to the stupid sheep, and Fishlegs followed his finger, mouth open wide enough to catch a jumping fish. He nodded a little too enthusiastically. "And you know what he said to me?" "He said, I just stole this lucky sock from some old guy." Nuffink feigned shock. "No." Fishlegs gasped. "He did. I bet that was your lucky sock, Uncle Fishy." Fishlegs shook his head. Well, I'll show him. He can't just go round, stealing people's lucky socks and stuff. Fishlegs held out his tankard, which Nothing barely caught as he let go of it, and rolled up his sleeves. He kicked up some dirt like a bull ready to charge, and ran after the sheep with a cracking, ear-splitting war cry. The sheep froze for a moment, but then ran off, a stumbling Fishlegs barely keeping up with him. Nothing looked down at the tankard in his hand. Well, what was he supposed to do with this now? What's with legs? Uncle Toughnut asked, walking up behind Nothing with Uncle Dager. Nothing shrugged. I told him the sheep was a troll that stole his lucky sock. He believed that. Tough asked. Fish has a lucky sock? Dager asked. Looks like it, Tough. I don't think he has a lucky sock, Nutmeg would have mentioned it by now. But he's the one that told me he lost his lucky sock. He held up the tankard of ale. He handed me this and ran after that stupid sheep. Nothing shook his head and muttered, I hate that sheep. Dager snickered. Toughnut snagged the tankard and asked, should we follow him? This could be fun before downing it in a single gulp. Nothing sighed. Yeah, Meg will kill me if he gets hurt cause of me. Dager pat Nothing's shoulder. Don't worry, kid, we won't let him get hurt. But we don't get to mess with fish very often. Agreed. Toughnut snickered. Letting this prime opportunity go would be such a crime. Nothing smiled. Well, if they were gonna mess with him anyway. They followed Fishlegs as he chased Yakdung around the great hall and near the tree line. Thanks to his anything but straight approach to catching him, it was quite easy to keep up. And Nothing noticed right away where the sheep was headed. Wait, I have an idea, he whispered to Dager and Toughnut, smiling at the steep incline that naturally reached up toward the great hall's roof. Dager and Toughnut were listening closely, so he continued. It's too steep here, but if we can make Yakdung go around a little more, he'll run up the hill to the roof. And I think we left those clothes we stole from Uncle Snotlout up there in the leaf pile. Including his socks. Wait, who's Yakdung? Dager asked. The sheep, Toughnut answered, rubbing his hands together in excitement. Oh, I like where your head is going, Nuffnut. Wait, like the roof to the hall? Dager clarified. Toughnut and Nothing both nodded enthusiastically. Dager laughed and shook his head. No way, you'll never get fish up there. Drunk or sober, the man is terrified of heights. Well, now he is, Toughnut muttered. You almost accidentally roll a guy off a cliff one time. Nothing snickered. He is pretty drunk. Drunker than I've ever seen him. Your Dager reminded him, but seemed to consider his words anyway. He glanced at Fishlegs, who was now rummaging through a bush threatening the troll while Yakdung chewed away on some weeds nearby. Toughnut crossed his arms, still smiling. Dear Nuffnut, dare I say you've grown into quite the follower of Loki. Dager swiveled his head back, matching Toughnut's smile. I'd love to see this. And so the three set off in different directions, sneaking closer to the stupid mindless sheep and the clueless Fishlegs. Nothing found the perfect poking stick on the ground as he snuck up behind Yakdung and poked his stupid stinky butt. He cried out and ran towards the base of the hill with Tough and Dager on either side, making sure he stayed on track. Fishlegs popped up out of the bush the minute Yakdung shrieked. Hey, troll! Get back here! I won my lucky sock, he yelled before taking off after him. Nothing cackled once they were out of earshot. Dager was right, pranking Fishlegs was so much more fun. He turned and quickly scaled the steep incline as he'd done many times before. After all, what better place to use as a lookout than the top of the Great Hall? He made it to the top just as Yakdung seemed tired enough to slow down, which did not take long at all. Fishlegs followed behind not long after, and Toughnut waved for Dager to follow him towards the hall roof. The hill stopped short of the flattest point of the rock, so Toughnut and Nothing had built stairs out of some short logs a few years earlier. Once he saw Toughnut showing Dager how to put them in place, he jumped out into view. Uncle Fishlegs. Did you get your sock back? Fishlegs looked bewildered. Oh yeah. My sock. Where did it go? I think the troll hid it in his evil stash. I saw it upstairs. Nothing pointed to the stairs and the flat portion of roof above them. Fishleg's face lit up. Aha! Marsok. He ran towards the stairs, but didn't quite judge the placement of them correctly. His first step fell on the edge of the left side of the log and slipped off. He tried again, but had the same problem as he didn't move outside of lifting the same leg again and placing it in the exact same entirely unhelpful spot. He turned around to nothing. I can't get in. Dager and Tough Nut snickered from the bush they were hiding in directly next to the stairs. Nothing snickered too, but tried to compose himself. It became much harder once another idea popped into his head. Maybe you need to take the troll with you. Oh, Fishlegs said, stretching out the single syllable. The troll is the key to the door. Dager fell on the ground, rolling and clutching his hands over his mouth to stay quiet. Nothing struggled to keep a straight face. Exactly. Fishlegs didn't need to ask any more questions. He stalked right over to the stupid sheep, who of course was paying no attention at all because he's a stupid sheep, and lifted him before Yakdung could figure out what was going on. Yakdung shrieked as Fishlegs threw him over his shoulders and said, "Welp, let's go get Masok." Tough Nut was also doubled over laughing now behind the bushes, especially after Nothing had to follow Fishlegs over to the stairs in order to make sure he actually made it past the first step this time. But then Fishlegs had no problem stumbling his way up the stairs and dropping Yakdung on the roof before spinning around to look for his lucky sock. "See anything, Uncle Fishy?" "Nope," he cried, but by the sound of the shuffling feet he was still looking. Nothing, Tough Nut, and Dager were all on the ground quietly laughing to themselves. But they all froze when they heard a very familiar sound of a girl clearing her throat. "Nothing, what do you think you're doing?" The three pranksters stood up immediately, answering, "Nothing," in a well-rehearsed chorus. Zephyr stared them all down with her arms crossed and eyes narrowed. "MHM. Where's Fishlegs? I know you three followed him up here." They all three pointed to the stairs leading to the roof. Suddenly, Fishlegs popped up above the top step. "I found Masok." He sniffed and made an unpleasant face. "Stinks more than I remember." "Snotlout usually does," too, Dager muttered, making Tough Nut and Nothing snicker. Zephyr sighed. "Uncle Fishlegs, what are you doing on the roof?" "It's the troll's secret hideaway. He stole my lucky sock." He waved Snotlout's sock around over his head. "No, it's not, it's the roof of the Great Hall." Fishlegs looked around, very confused, before he noticed how high above the village center he was. His eyes flew open wide. "Get him down from there," Zephyr ordered. Tough Nut immediately obliged, pulling Fishlegs down the stairs and pointing him back in the direction they came up the hill. "Is there anything else up there I should know about?" Zephyr asked, starting to turn around to follow Fishlegs. "Nope, Nothing said before Dager or Tough Nut could bring up the sheep." "Fine. Then move those stairs before some other drunk wanders up there and gets themselves killed, would you?" She ran after Fishlegs and escorted him back to the party. Nothing smiled. "Sure, sis." So after they dismantled the stairs and Nothing heard a satisfyingly annoyed noise from a now trapped Yakdung, he wandered around through the crowd again, not really sure what to do with himself anymore. He figured one harmless prank would be enough for tonight, especially since Zephyr was the one that caught them. He didn't want to make tonight any harder on her than it already was. But then he saw Spitaloot running his mouth again across the hall. And he couldn't really let that go once he saw Zephyr's name cross his lips. After all, he didn't want to make tonight any harder on her than it already was. He glanced over to the table of desserts that he had been helping himself to. He smiled and picked up a particularly delicious pastry filled with a fluffy cream and wandered outside. He had to admit this wasn't his most well-planned prank. He tried not to be too hard on himself since it was a last-minute decision. But he already had enough of Spitaloot bad-mouthing his sister. He snuck back over to the forest and found a fallen log small enough for him to roll over himself. He looked over the assortment of bugs and critters and chose one that looked particularly juicy and squishy. After wrestling with the bug to convince it to burrow into the pastry, he found Spitaloot still talking with a group of old villagers at a table. He walked past, wondering how he should best approach the table, but Spitaloot made that unnecessary. "Oh. Nothing, boyo, come here." "Oh boy." Spitaloot waved him closer and clapped his back. Did ye think about what I said earlier? You mean, about how I should be chief instead of Zephyr? Nothing slowly replied, not at all liking where this was going. Exactly, Spitaloot said, poking Nothing's chest. He turned to the rest of the table and added, see. Smart boy, this one. Resourceful, strong, helpful, responsible. Always looking out for the people of his village, isn't that right, boyo? Nothing didn't want to answer, but one of the other men didn't give him a chance to, anyway. Of course he is, look at him. Cleans up well, I think. Much tougher than that little girl, too, I'd wager. Zephyr is older than me, Nothing defended. Don't let that stop you, Spitaloot said. She's a girl. That job is your birthright, not hers. She can't handle such an important role. But you would make an excellent chief. You're strong, grounded. Don't you want the best for your tribe? I guess. Of course ye do. Because you're real chief material. He clapped Nothing on the back again. Now don't forget what I told you, ye hear? Your dad is still chief, so he can still take back this little misunderstanding and announce the real heir. Don't get discouraged, understand? The table of elders looked at him expectantly. He turned back to Spitaloot. You know what, you're right. I'll remember every single word you've ever said about me and Zephyr. He looked down at his hands and held out the pastry. Here, you can have this. I got it just for you to thank you. These are my favorite. Spitaloot smiled and took the pastry. Ah, well thank you, boyo. Now don't forget to talk to your father about all of this. Run along. Yes sir. Nothing smiled and walked away. Oh, he'll bring it up to Dad, all right. But he'll probably wait until Mom wasn't around. Tilda. The rest of the night seemed to fly by to Zephyr. After showing Fish Legs back to Rough Nut and explaining more or less what happened, which Rough Nut found incredibly funny, Zephyr spent most of the night avoiding Ethan. The necklace in her hand seemed to burn a hole through her palm again, but even though she couldn't bring herself to think about it, she couldn't bring herself to put it away either. But her mind was trying to think of too many other things at once already, so she couldn't think about that at the moment. By the time she managed to slip home, she all but crashed into her bed and fell asleep instantly. But she was woken up far too early the next morning by her mother, and ushered through breakfast and dressing in order to bid farewell to the guests. Ethan must have gotten the point, as he simply told her, I'll send Orboda back with a test message once we get home, and left with a quiet wave and a shy smile. She tried to ignore how the wave and smile made her heart flutter. With the guests back on the water and sailing off, daily activities resumed. Zephyr tried to stay around her father, but something about the village was different today. She tried to pretend she didn't know why, but they all did. It was hard to ignore the side glances she got from everyone. It made focusing on anything her father was doing quite difficult. She kept looking for an excuse to escape and take a break from the judgmental stares to no avail. But then Agna came running up to Hiccup, going on about how his prized sheep was missing again. Suddenly, Zephyr remembered that Fish Legs had chased a sheep up the hillside the night before. Hiccup was trying to reassure Agna, but Zephyr jumped in. Agna, don't worry, I think I know where your sheep might have gone off to. Hiccup and Agna both looked at her. You do? Agna asked. I do. I think he, got spooked last night during the festivities. I saw one running off to hide. Just give me an hour or two, I'll see to it personally that he's returned to you unharmed. Agna looked at Hiccup, who shrugged and nodded. All right, he said. Thank you, Zephyr. Zephyr smiled pleasantly. Not a problem. She waved to her father and ran off towards the Great Hall. It didn't take her long to climb back up the hill and locate the logs she knew Tough Nut and Nothing used to climb up to the roof. She put them in place and climbed up, where sure enough, she found a lazy sheep laying in the sun and munching on the scarce vegetation that had grown through the stone. Nothing, she groaned to herself. She walked over and started to coax the sheep up, mocking the conversation they had the night before. Is there anything else up there I should know about? Oh, no, of course not, Zephyr. Just a sheep that I have some stupid vendetta against. For the love of Thor, Nuff, why does it have to be Agnes' favorite sheep you decide to have a feud with? After a minute of coaxing, the sheep finally stood and pranced down the stairs, headed back to the village. Sort of. He made sure to take his time down the hill and help himself to every plant along the way. Zephyr sighed and sat down, enjoying the peace of not having eyes constantly turning her direction for the first time since last night. The sheep could wait a minute. She lifted her chin as the wind picked up, loose locks of her hair blowing across her face. She took a deep breath, trying to let her mind settle. She had been shaky ever since that overwhelming fear almost consumed her last night in the caves. She had managed to hold that feeling at bay, but she could still feel it brewing deep inside her, waiting for the chance to escape. But she couldn't let it. Not again. She reached into her small bag and pulled out the blue stone necklace Ethan gave her. She turned it over in her fingers, watching the light glitter through the smooth sides of the stone. Sighing, she pulled her knees to her chest and rested her chin on them. She felt guilty for treating Ethan the way she did last night, but it was all too overwhelming for her. And then he gave her this incredible gift on top of all that. She didn't know how to take it, or what he meant by it. It almost made her nervous to see what his test message would say. She clutched the necklace to her chest. Still, it was nice how much he seemed to care for her. She looked off towards the southeast, still barely able to make out the outcast ship on the horizon sailing back home. Maybe she should start opening up to him. As an ally. And maybe as a friend. She scanned the horizon, enjoying the peace and quiet. She was steadily realizing how much she had taken it for granted. She saw the berserker ship headed east back home. But then she noticed 3 ships far off to the northeast. She tried to think back to who that would be, but she couldn't think of any tribe located that direction. Except for the wing maidens, but they never traveled by boat. Even if they did, they weren't present last night as far as Zephyr could remember. But after some time she realized the ships weren't sailing away from Newburgh. They were sailing towards Newburgh. And Newburgh wasn't exactly expecting any other visitors. And then her worst fears were suddenly realized. 2 long blows of a horn rang out through the village, a signal that Zephyr knew the meaning of but had never actually heard used in her lifetime. Enemy ships approaching. Chapter 10, Preparing for Battle. Notes. And we're back. I know I left you guys on a bit of a cliffhanger last week, so I'll keep this short, but I wanted to make one quick announcement. Up until now I have been posted every week on Fridays. I will be starting university again at the end of the month, and, for my sanity sake, will be switching to uploading every other week instead. I will keep posting every Friday through August, and then switch to every other Friday in September. And with that, I'll shut up and let you all get to it. ********************** TW, graphic depiction of injuries ********************** Chapter text. After Zephyr had run off to find Agnes' prized sheep, Hiccup tried to go on with the day's usual schedule, fully trusting her to handle the situation and honestly not wanting to know why she knew where the sheep was, though he suspected nothing had something to do with it. And he expected the day to go pretty smoothly. After the announcement, most of the village was slow to get moving this morning. Today should have been relaxed. But then Eret requested Hiccup's presence immediately. Which never happened. I didn't want to alarm anyone, but I don't have a good feeling about this, either, Eret muttered to the chief as they hurried to the lookout post. Hiccup waited until they were climbing the stairs of the lookout to reply. What did you see? Ships. 3, to be exact. But not ones I recognize. And they appear to be sailing directly towards us. Are you sure? I am. But I wanted your opinion first. Hiccup practically ran to the large eyeglass, equally eager and afraid to see what Eret was so worried about. Unfortunately, it only made Hiccup's stomach drop. There were indeed 3 ships, and they did in fact seem to be headed directly for Newburgh. But Hiccup didn't recognize the flag they flew under. Actually, there really wasn't anything on the ship to indicate a tribe, or that gave any clue as to where the ship originated. He couldn't even see much of a crew, and the few he did see wore long furs with hoods. Trader's ship. Hiccup wondered, and almost hoped, aloud. I fear not, Eret said hesitantly. The only trader we have ever had at this island was Casimir, and that was nearly 10 years ago. On top of that, I didn't see much in terms of goods on those ships. Unless you count weaponry. Oh, good, Hiccup quipped. He took a closer look, and quickly noted a large assortment of shiny spears and other assorted weaponry littered across the deck of all three ships. Wait. Those spears look familiar. He strained to see clearer. Those are Wing Maiden spears. Are you sure? It's hard to tell from this distance, but their spears are pretty unique. And those spears are the right color, right size. Hiccup continued to scan the deck of each ship, his heart suddenly pounding in his ears. The Wing Maidens were supposed to be at Zephyr's announcement last night. None of them made it, he breathed. Hiccup heard Eret shift uncomfortably next to him. What are you thinking, Chief? That those are Wing Maiden ships? Hiccup shook his head slowly. The Wing Maidens don't have ships. As the ships drew closer, Hiccup could see armor that matched the material of the spears scattered across the deck as well, but that armor wasn't exactly in good shape. So what are you implying? Eret asked slowly. Hiccup straightened up. I'm afraid the Wing Maidens were attacked. And their attacker has now set their sights on us. Eret finished. Hiccup nodded. That's my fear, yes. Eret paused. You think Atali would give away our location? Gods, no, Hiccup quickly assured. Not willingly. But if her tribe and the Razor Whip's lives were on the line, there's only so much she can do. They could have gotten information from other places in the island if they raided it. If they were held and tortured, Hiccup choked out the word, sick to his stomach at the thought of any of those women or their dragons enduring something like that. Something may slip if they are worn down enough. I wouldn't hold any of that against them. Eret looked out to the ships. What's the order, Chief Haddock? Hiccup gripped the eyeglass tighter and tried to take a deep breath. It didn't really work. Alert the village to prepare for an attack. Eret blinked and swiveled his head back to Hiccup. Are you sure? No one is getting hurt because I was too afraid to stand up and fight. Not again. No running away. No waiting to try to talk things out peacefully. Hiccup turned to walk back down the stairs, jaw and shoulders set. He pointed to a crewman named Holger as he walked and ordered, sound the alert now. 2 long blows. Holger nodded and ran to the Thunder Ear 3 while Eret followed Hiccup back down to the ground, the eerie sound of the formerly unused warning sending shivers down everyone's spines. We prepare for the worst and pray to the gods we didn't need to. Go find Snotlout first, he's going to have to be acting general. I am not putting Astrid in the middle of this right now, not that she'll be happy about it. Send anyone not properly armed to the forge and we'll do our best to fix that. Those ships are sailing against the wind so we have time, but I want everyone moving like they are already at our shores. We're all a little rusty, every second is vital. And if you see Zephyr, send her to the forge immediately. Aye, Chief Eret responded before taking off in search of Snotlout. Hiccup started off in the opposite direction, headed directly for the forge and shouting orders to anyone he passed in the process. He tried to ignore the pounding in his ears, the knot in his stomach, and the dizziness in his head. He couldn't let fear overwhelm him now, no matter how much he hated that he had to make these orders. Not when he had a duty to his tribe. A chief protects his own. He bounded into the forge, breathing heavy and ignoring the ache in his stump. He suddenly realized how long it had been since he ran like that. Man, he was out of shape. He was met by Gobber's worried glare, Nuffink's confused stance, and Spro's frightened eyes. Daddy, Spro said, walking up to Hiccup, what's going on? Hiccup lifted Spro and set him on one of the workbenches, hugging him tightly. Well, bud, there's some funny ships out in the water that we don't recognize. So we're getting ready in case they aren't nice people. Are they gonna fight us? Spro asked, tears welling in his eyes. Hiccup's heart broke. I really hope not, bud. He turned to Gobber, arm still locked around Spro. How many weapons do we have in here? Gobber raised his eyebrows and turned to the back corner of the forge, pushing open a door that led to Gobber's personal workspace. Hiccup followed and found stacks upon stacks of various weaponry piled in every available space. Quite a few, I'd wager, Gobber quipped. Hiccup blinked. Gods, Gobber, where did all of this come from? Well, there's only so much to do around here without dragon teeth to fix. I get bored sitting in here with no projects. So I take the scrap metal, and, well, Gobber gestured to all of the room. I got bored a lot over the last 15 years. Hiccup blinked again. I guess I can't even be mad about that. You may have just saved all of our asses. He shook his head and started pulling axes. Right, okay, we need to get as many of these sharpened and ready for combat as possible. Nuff, do you remember how I showed you to sharpen axes? Yeah, Nuffink said, jumping at the opportunity to help. Hiccup dropped the axe pile in front of him. Go for it, bud. Nuffink smiled and nodded his head, soaking in the pile of weaponry before him. Sweet. Hiccup shook his head and retrieved some swords to sharpen himself. Don't get too excited. As soon as Zephyr gets here, you both are going home and bunkering down. Spro hugged his knees to his chest. Daddy, I'm scared. I know, Spees, I'm sorry, but Hiccup said, wishing he could stop sharpening swords and just hold his shaking son. But it's going to be okay. Zephyr is going to keep you safe. Who's gonna keep you safe? Spro asked. Hiccup smiled at him. Uncle Snotlout is gonna keep me safe, just like Mommy would if she didn't have to be with you guys. Spro nodded his head, content enough with that answer but still visibly frightened. Dad. Hiccup heard Zephyr's voice call out as she flew through the village. Oh, good, Zephyr, he sighed in relief as she ran into the forge. Take your brothers, get your mom and sister, and get home, all right? What? No, I'm staying with you, she fought. Zephyr, I really don't have time. No, nothing can get Mom and Spro and Willow, I'm staying with you. Zephyr. I'm staying. Hiccup froze, staring down his defiant daughter, ticking off the options in his head. But in reality, he knew he only had one option. He saw the determination burning behind her eyes. She was equally his and Astrid's daughter, after all. If he didn't agree, she'd just sneak out once she got home. His hands balled into fists. Better to keep everyone on the same page rather than risk one going rogue. Nothing, get everyone home, Hiccup ordered, not breaking eye contact with Zephyr. Come on, Spro, let's go find Mom, he heard Nothing say hesitantly. Nothing helped Spro off the counter before his sons ran off after looking back at Zephyr and him over their shoulder. He clenched his jaw, begging himself not to say something he'd regret later. You stay right by me. No running off. And you follow every order I give you to the letter, do you understand me? Zephyr nodded her head. Sharpen those axes. He pointed to the pile Nothing had been working on. Zephyr nodded silently and got straight to work. Hiccup looked over to find Gobber giving him a that was a little harsh look. Which he returned with a now is so not the time glare. Gobber shrugged and bent back over the maces he was working on. Acting General, reporting for duty, Snotlout said as he ran up to the forge window. What's the plan, Chief? How many fighters do we have? Hiccup asked, not breaking from his work. Take out the kids, the elders that can't walk, and your pregnant wife, and you've got the entire village, Snotlout listed. Iret's getting his archers ready at the cliffs now. I don't know what those crewmen are doing, but we haven't seen many more people come up on the ship decks. Hiccup wasn't sure if that made him feel better or worse. Assume the worst. We'll go from there. I'd rather be prepared than caught off guard. Aye, Chief. Where do you want the rest of the fighters? Around the archers. We need to keep an eye on the crew once they get closer to the island. I don't know if they have a plan to get from the sea up here, but I don't want to give them the chance to circle around us. They've had plenty of time staring at that cliff face to figure it out if they are smart enough. I'll start funneling people that way once they're armed. Snotlout waved the first wave of fighters towards the forge and stepped to the side, barking orders. Hiccup, Gobber, and Zephyr did their best to prep as many weapons as they could, but figured it best to leave the rest untouched after every Viking was armed in case the intruders found their way into Gobber's armory. Gobber started to get up and follow the other Vikings towards the cliffs, but Hiccup stopped him. Maybe you should stay here. You know, guard the weapons and stand by in case someone needs a backup. I can fight just as good as any of those dimwits, Gobber argued. Gobber, please, Hiccup quietly begged. I don't doubt your fighting skills, but I don't know what's about to walk off those ships. And I'm not blind, I know you haven't been walking as well lately. For my sake, please, just stay here. Gobber pursed his lips. Ye can't protect everyone, lad. Hiccup's eyes flickered Zephyr's direction involuntarily, and he was glad she was behind him and couldn't see it. I know. But that won't stop me from trying. Gobber sighed. Go. I'll stay here. Thank you, Gobber. Hiccup sighed in relief. He turned to Zephyr and thought for a moment. If he left her with Gobber, she'll be out of the direct battle, but also out of his protection. If he brought her with him, he could make sure she was safe, but there was a chance he could lose her at some point if things got too crazy. He pursed his lips. If he left her with Gobber, she'd run off, and Gobber would end up going after her. Damn it. Zephyr, let's go, he said, grabbing a sword. Zephyr followed with an axe in hand. Hiccup prayed to every god he knew that he wouldn't regret this. Archers, stand by, he ordered to the line of Vikings standing atop the lookout with Iret. Do your best to hit anything you can on those decks, but wait for my signal. He was met with a chorus of "Aye, Chief," from the archers. Everyone else, keep an eye out for anyone getting off those ships. If anyone manages to step foot on this island, make them regret it. Aye, Chief. About time we see some action again, he heard a man nearby say. Oh, it's been far too long, someone replied, and Hiccup could hear the smile in his voice. Hiccup shivered. Please let all of this be pointless. Archers, stay where you are, everyone else back out of range in case they have their own archers ready. They backed up, but not as much as Hiccup had wanted. He kept his eyes locked on the ships. Zephyr, he said quietly, stand behind me. But do not argue with me. Zephyr slid behind Hiccup without another word. He saw a figure walk up onto the deck of the lead ship and turn towards them. Archers at the ready, he instantly cried, holding up his right hand. But when he noticed the figure limping, he quickly added, wait for my signal. Everyone tensed. Hiccup gripped his sword tighter in his left hand. The figure reached the bow of the ship and removed the hood of the furs, and Hiccup's eyes flew open wide. Atali. Stand down. Hiccup choked. Archers, stand down. The archers all looked to Iret, who signaled them to relax. What is it, Chief? He wasn't sure what was going on, but if Atali was on the lead ship, then there may be more wing maidens with her. And if that was the case, then he had to approach this delicately to avoid harming them. Change of plans, Hiccup called out. Iret, you take charge of the archers and some of the ground forces and watch our backs. Snotlout and I will take the rest and go down to find out what's going on. I need to know how many wing maidens are on those ships. Iret nodded his head and turned to start giving orders. Hiccup separated the men he wanted to stay in addition to Iret's archers and led the rest to the pulleys. Snotlout, pick your 5 best men. They'll go down with us in case someone wants to pick a fight. Everyone else will stay at the top as a buffer in case they overtake us and use the pulley system to get up to the village. Zephyr, you'll stay up here with Fish. I'm not going down with you, she protested. No. You're staying up here with Fish. But I can fight. Hiccup tried not to let his anger get the best of him. Zephyr, as your chief, I am ordering you to stay landside with Fish legs, do you understand? Zephyr paused before muttering, yes, chief. He half expected her to jump on the pulley at the last minute, but thankfully she stayed put next to Fish legs, who was also given the order to command the ground forces in case Hiccup and Snotlout were unable to. As they began their descent, the ships changed course at Atali's command closer to the corner of the island they hung from. Hiccup's nerves only grew the closer they got to the water, and the closer the ships sailed to them. He wanted to believe the fact that the ships obeyed Atali's command meant that she was in control and not someone else. But the reality of the situation was that she just as likely could be doing what she had to as a hostage to keep her tribe safe, to no fault of her own, of course. But if they truly were hostages, then Hiccup needed to gather as much information as he could in order to find the best way to save the wing maidens and take down their attacker. The only true relief he felt was in the size of the ships. They were fairly small, enough that unless each ship was bursting at the seams with Vikings below their decks, the Vikings of Newburgh would easily outnumber them. And even if they were packed, it would at least be a fairly even fight. The lead ship closed enough distance for Atali to say, "I apologize for the surprise visit," hiccup accompanied by a weak smile. "Are you okay? And your tribe?" he asked. Atali sighed. "We are. Lucky, I believe is the more accurate word. Many of us are injured, but no fatalities." Her face darkened, and she added, "Yet, at least. I didn't remember your tribe having ships," he carefully stated, hoping not to offend Atali and that she would understand where he was going with his questions. "We don't." She laughed weakly. "Well, I suppose we do now. We were attacked, and our island has been burnt to the ground. We were able to appropriate 3 of their ships to escape the island." Hiccup nodded slowly. "And what about your attackers?" Atali smiled. "I can assure you that my wing maidens are the only living beings on these ships. We left all of our attackers on the island." She gestured to the ships behind her. "Please feel free to search." Hiccup took in Atali's stature. She looked exhausted, and on top of the limp, she was clutching her side. But she didn't look afraid or worried or concerned. He looked to Snotlout, who nodded. Snotlout motioned to the team working the pulley to drop the lift the rest of the way to the deck. Once Hiccup was back on the deck, he had a new set of priorities. "Atali," he said, wrapping her in a gentle hug. She practically fell into him, which only worried him more. "What happened to you guys? Are you okay? How many of your women are injured?" "A lot," Atali sighed, trying to straighten back up. Hiccup wasn't entirely sure which question she was answering, but even more worried that the one answer fit all of them. He had never seen her look so weak. Hiccup secured Atali to his side with one arm and turned back to the men awaiting orders on the lift. "Snotlout, go back up and send someone for Tough Nut. Tell him we have a lot of wing maidens that need attention urgently. Either use his hut or set up Mom's place or the Great Hall or both as an extension of his hut, I don't care, just find space. Send more men down after you reach the top. The rest of you, search the ships to make sure there's no stowaways, but then focus on getting those women topside. Start with the most severely injured and work your way through. Go." Snotlout's chosen 5 immediately went to work searching the ship and surveying the injured. Snotlout paused and locked eyes with Hiccup, worry evident in his eyes, and then looked to Atali. "Is Minden," he started, obviously not wanting to finish the question. "She's alive," Atali assured him, though Hiccup thought she sounded hesitant. Snotlout didn't seem reassured either. "I'll find her myself," Snot Hiccup promised. "I'll send her up as soon as I do. Have Fishlegs come down here with the next set of helpers, will you?" Snotlout hesitated for a moment, but eventually nodded and signaled to have the lift return to the surface. "Are you hurt?" Hiccup asked as he turned back to Atali. "I'll be fine, but Hiccup, we need to call a meeting urgently," she said. "Not until we get you checked out," Hiccup argued. "Hiccup, we may not have the luxury of waiting around." "I don't care," he cut her off. "I saw you limping, you haven't let go of your side, and you can barely stand on your own. Go see Tough Nut, and then we'll call a meeting. There are more women that are much more injured than I am that need attention long before I do," she argued back. "Then at least let Zephyr take a look at you and make sure it's nothing too serious," he pleaded. "She's been working very closely with Rough Nut for years, and if she says you can wait, then we'll call the meeting." Atali sighed. "All right. But we can't wait much longer. I don't think we were followed, but I can't be sure." "Well, you won't do us much good if you're too hurt to give us information. Go up with the next group. Are you okay to wait here while I find Minden?" Atali nodded tiredly, so Hiccup helped her to the side of the ship where she would have something to lean against before running off to find Minden. Unfortunately, it didn't take long to find her. One of the men sent off to gather injured wing maidens named Frode was already carrying her up from below deck of the lead ship. And she didn't look good. Her arm was bent in a very unnatural way, and Hiccup thought he could see bones sticking out of her skin. She was covered in so much blood that he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Her eyes were closed and her face paler than the moon. Her hair was caked with sweat and blood and had fallen completely out of her typical tight ponytail. It was hard to tell around the blood, but Hiccup thought he saw a black eye and a split lip on her face as well. His stomach dropped to his feet when he saw just how limp she was. Holy shit, Minden, he breathed. Frode, give her to me and go see who else needs to come up with the first group. Frode nodded and handed Minden off to Hiccup. He felt a slight relief when he noticed her chest rapidly and shallowly rising and falling, but not much. She looked terrible, and Hiccup tried to ignore how often Vikings in this kind of shape didn't make it. He prayed to the gods she was the exception. For Snotlout's sake. Hiccup practically ran back to Atali as the lift lowered onto the deck again. Atali gasped as she took in Minden's state. Oh no, that's not good. Hiccup cringed. Please tell me you just remembered you forgot something back on the island. Atali looked pained when she met Hiccup's eyes. She's getting worse. Hiccup felt like crying. Yeah, he choked, that's what I thought you meant. They shared a worried glance and waited for the lift to reach the deck, which felt like hours later. Hiccup wasted no time ordering Frode and the others on the platform. Fishlegs stepped off with a handful more men and helped Atali onto the platform, awaiting Hiccup's orders. Take over for me down here, Legs. Most critical injuries first, take care of who you can down here. I don't know how fast Tough is going to run out of room. Fishlegs' stare was locked on Minden. You got it, Chief, he muttered. He met Hiccup's eyes and looked incredibly worried. I know, Hiccup muttered back. Me too. I left Zephyr up top with Snotlout, Fishlegs added, signaling to raise the lift. Thank you. Hiccup and the rest of the men kneeled down to give their arms a break and their bodies some more stability while the lift raised back to land. Atali practically fell down next to Hiccup, he barely managed to free an arm to catch her. You're not making me feel any better about rushing right into a meeting, he quipped. Atali sighed. It was a long battle. We fought for 3 days straight. We are all exhausted. But Hiccup. Don't but hiccup me, he teased before turning somber. You will be much more helpful to us after you've gotten some help and some rest. Hiccup, she sighed. We have plenty of natural defenses in case you were followed. We'll keep the lookout post manned at all times. If anyone is coming for us, we'll know in plenty of time. Hiccup could tell she wanted to fight back again, but she didn't have the energy to keep it up anymore. She leaned against Hiccup, sighed, and closed her eyes. The rest of the ride to the top of the island was eerily quiet. As they passed the edge of the cliff, Hiccup kept his eye on Snotlout. He was singularly focused on organizing everyone as best as he could in preparation for the injured wing maidens. But the moment he turned and saw Minden lying limp in Hiccup's arms, he broke. The blood drained from his face, fear overwhelmed his eyes, and Hiccup could practically hear his heart break. Minden! Snotlout cried, voice cracking on every syllable. He rushed forward, holding out his arms, and Hiccup didn't hesitate to pass her over. Minden, gods, what happened to you? Minden's eyes fluttered open. She smiled weakly. That's Wing Maiden. To you. SN Lout. Snotlout looked like he wanted to collapse as his eyes filled with tears, but he chuckled and breathed, gods, you're stubborn as ever. Go, Snotlout, Hiccup ordered gently, wrapping an arm around Atali again to hold her up. I can take over here. Get her help. Snotlout nodded, his thanks evident in his eyes, and took off to find Tough Nut. Hang in there, Minden, Hiccup heard Snotlout plead as he ran. Dad, Zephyr started, and Hiccup turned to see her almost as pale as Minden. What happened to them? I'm not sure yet, but we'll find out as soon as we can, okay? Hiccup reassured her. She nodded slowly, still looking off in the direction Snotlout had run off. As angry as he was with her, he couldn't ignore the fact that she had never seen anything like this in her life. He knew it couldn't be easy on her. Zephyr, sweetheart, come here. He waved her over with his free hand and opened his arm. She slowly walked over to him and he pulled her into a slightly awkward side hug. Atali reached across Hiccup to squeeze Zephyr's shoulder. Zeph, can you do me a favor? Zephyr nodded. I want you to go get Mom and catch her up on what happened, okay? Just tell her what you know for now and we'll get more information later. Let Grammy Runner know that we need some stew for the wing maidens, and help her if she needs it. Go get something to eat while you're at it and rest for a bit, Take your time, and then start looking for the council members and tell them to meet in the Great Hall as soon as possible. Except for Rough and Tough, I'm sure they'll be busy. Can you do that for me? Zephyr silently met Hiccup's eyes and nodded. Okay, Hiccup said, kissing her forehead. Go ahead, sweetheart. Zephyr started off, and Hiccup watched her long enough to make sure she stayed on track and didn't get distracted. Do you think that's too much for her to handle right now? Is she okay? Atali asked. Hiccup sighed. Sadly, it was more than I was planning to have her do. But when she gets overwhelmed she does better with a longer list of things to do. Otherwise she just sits and starts overthinking things. She does better with a constructive list. Atali nodded absent-mindedly as Hiccup continued directing people as best as he could until Irette ran up to take over, insisting Hiccup go with Atali and do what they needed to do. After some debate, Hiccup agreed, but not before making sure Irette left the lookout post adequately manned and ordered scouts in sets of 3 be sent around the island edges to watch for any other threats. As satisfied as he could be for the moment, Hiccup practically carried Atali back towards his home, figuring she'd let Astrid take a look at her at the very least and ease Hiccup's conscience. And he could check on Zephyr while he was at it. Hiccup Atali started once they were out of earshot. I really think we should get your injuries looked at. I agree. Hiccup. Atali, I promise, we will meet as soon as possible and talk through what happened to your tribe. But we need to get your tribe off of those ships first and get those ships hidden in the cove. We should have space for all of them. Atali sighed. I sincerely appreciate what you're doing for my tribe. I just worry that this is the beginning of a much larger issue. And I agree. And that's why we'll have a council meeting. After everyone is at least mostly settled. Atali was quiet for a moment, but eventually whispered, thank you. After a while, she added, will you take me to check on Minden if I can't make it over there myself? She's the worst off of any of us, and... Of course Hiccup breathed. I'm sure Snotlout won't be leaving her side anytime soon, though. We'll do everything we can. Atali nodded, but was at a loss for words. Hiccup couldn't blame her. Minden was her right-hand woman. He imagined losing Minden would be like Hiccup losing Astrid. Suddenly another thought occurred to Hiccup. Wait, Atali, where are your baby razor whips? Atali's face fell. Somewhere safe, I hope. That's part of what I need to talk to you about. We fought for 3 days, until we got more backup. When the mothers set the island on fire, they took the babies and were escorted away. Hold on, what do you mean backup? Atali locked eyes with Hiccup, her face apologetic. Light Furies. Led by Toothless. Chapter 11, Close Call. Chapter Text. Zephyr hugged her furs tightly around her as she quietly snuck outside, headed towards the southwest corner of the island. She took a deep breath of the refreshing morning air, still chilled by the bite of the nighttime temperatures. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the first suggestions of light were just beginning to peek over the horizon to the east. An eerie calm had settled on the island, mingling with the fog and the morning dew. We'll meet first thing in the morning. Right now, everyone needs to rest. That was the last thing she had heard her father say before she slipped off to her room in a bit of a daze. She tried to sort through the events of yesterday, but it was still hard to think about. After seeing that wing maiden practically mangled, she couldn't get the image out of her head. It made her sick to her stomach. Did people just move on from things like that? Like it was no big deal? Did they just pretend it didn't happen and continue on with their day? Uncle Snotlout seemed so devastated by the shape she was in, but Zephyr could tell there was something else going on there. Had it been any other wing maiden, he probably wouldn't have bat an eye. And before she even had a moment to think over any of that, her father was giving her a list of duties to accomplish. She liked lists. Lists were good. Lists gave her things to focus on. So she ran off to complete her list. Talk to Mom. Talk to Grammy Runner. Help Grammy if she needs it. Eat. Rest. Gather council in the Great Hall, minus Rough Nut and Tough Nut. Okay. Yeah, she could do that. So she ran to get Mom, who was waiting rather impatiently at home with Nuffink, Spro, and Willow. She explained the false alarm, the wing maidens, and anything else she could think of. And before Mom could say anything, she ran off to find Grammy Runner. Grandpapa was there too, so she helped with the prep work, but then wasn't needed. So Zephyr ran back home to get something to eat, though she wasn't exactly hungry, and Dad was there with Atali. Mom was looking over Atali for any injuries, and Dad said there was going to be a slight change of plans. Council would meet first thing in the morning in order to focus on getting the wing maidens settled. Which meant Zephyr was sort of out of things to do. Her parents suggested she could help with the minorly injured wing maidens, but then all she could see was that one beaten and broken wing maiden her father carried up from the ship. And then that tightness came back to her chest, and she couldn't breathe, and she decided she just needed some space for the rest of the day. So she went off to the same place she was walking to now. But when being alone made things worse, she buried herself in helping Grammy Runner prep a large dinner for the wing maidens. And when she ran out of things to do there, she just went to bed. That was when she heard her father talking to Atali in the main room. Atali had suggested meeting now despite the fact that the sun was already dipping below the horizon. But her father had told her it was best to wait. She didn't sleep well through the night, either. Once she was alone in the darkness of her room, the tightness in her chest overwhelmed her. She had to stuff her face in her pillow to keep her parents from hearing her cries. When she finally fell asleep, she had dreams of people slashing their way through the village with their swords and axes, not caring who fell victim to their rampaging. She saw her brothers and sister and parents and aunts and uncles all falling to the ground in front of her, and then the entire tribe, until she was the only one left. She jerked awake just before the attackers reached her. Zephyr shivered at the memory of the dream, telling herself it was the chill of the morning breeze. Pushing back some hanging vines, she revealed the opening of a small cave set in a narrow cliff. To the right was another opening completely covered by one of the many waterfalls that flowed off the island. The dim morning light illuminated the space just enough to see the larger rocks and divots in the floor, but Zephyr knew their placement by heart. The waterfall made it a little chilly, so Zephyr wasted no time pulling out the fur blanket she kept hidden in the back of the cave and snuggling up in it. She pulled out a journal and some charcoal she kept with the blanket, opening it to the last page she had been working on. Resting back against the cool rock, she continued her sketch of a bird perched on a tree branch. She sighed, finally content again with the rushing sound of the waterfall and the peaceful chirping of wildlife around her. A gentle breeze danced with the vines over the entrance of her hideaway. She wasn't sure how long she would be able to stay here before the rest of the island started to wake, but she planned to relish every moment of it. She lifted her bag over her head and set it beside her, leaning her head back and resting her eyes. She heard her bag fall over, followed by a light ting, ting 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 of something falling out of the bag and onto the rock next to her. She looked down to find Eason's necklace glittering up at her like a clear puddle of water sparkling in the sun. Picking it up, she grazed the smooth cut of the gem with her fingers and turned it over in her hands. Hopefully the outcasts were doing better than the wing maidens. They would be on the second day of their journey, probably nearing a halfway point between their island and hers. Maybe she would see Orboda soon, carrying a message of their safe return to their home. Maybe that would help Zephyr feel a little better, knowing that at least one of their allies was safe. She felt a tightness in her chest, but not the same one she felt last night. It wasn't the same overwhelming fear that unraveled her until she was a shrived, crying mess on the ground. It was softer than that, almost like longing, like a sad yearning for something that was too far out of reach. She focused back on the blue gem precariously perched between her fingers. She found herself curling her hand around it instead, clutching it tightly and holding it against her chest. It wasn't a perfect fix, and she wasn't entirely sure why she did it, but it felt right. Maybe she should have been a little more open with Eason when he was here. Maybe she should have shown more appreciation for the gift that he obviously spent so much time and effort into creating. It really was beautiful, and she really did appreciate it. It had just surprised her so much. She hadn't prepared herself for something that could mean so much more than just well wishes from an ally. But if that reaction was the last thing Eason ever saw of her. She sighed quietly in frustration and leaned her head back against the cave wall. Why was she even thinking about that right now? There were more important matters to deal with, Steps to take that could mean the difference between the survival and total destruction of the only island she had ever called home. Like making sure the needed people were present at this morning's council meeting. She sighed again, more out of exhaustion this time, and lifted her head to inspect the progress of the sun. The cave was brighter now, with light piercing through the ever-changing cascade and throwing pieces of itself around on the floor like dancing fairies. To the front of the cave, the vines teased the sun with a more direct passage into Zephyr's asylum, but the maze of light and shadow that she knew so well wouldn't replace the dancing fairies until the day's end. But if the fairies were awake, then the rest of the tribe would soon be as well. So she stashed her journal and charcoal and blanket and headed back towards the village, shaking off the fear of yesterday and embracing the chances today would bring. Her first stop was at home, where her mother was already in the kitchen putting breakfast together. She looked up in surprise when Zephyr walked in the door, who immediately intervened to make sure breakfast was still edible by the time Mom was done with it. "You're up early," Mom mused carefully. Zephyr nodded quietly and began cutting some apples. "I didn't sleep well." "So you took a midnight stroll?" Zephyr shook her head. "Just this morning." Mom nodded, but didn't have any other comments. So they continued preparing breakfast in silence, interrupted only by the occasional suggestion from Zephyr to her mother. Not long after, they heard the sounds of her father waking and slowly making his way downstairs. And once he entered the kitchen, Zephyr was shocked to see how terrible he looked. His eyes were dark and sunken, he walked hunched over, and his limp was more pronounced than normal. Zephyr caught a small sound of surprise from Mom, but she recovered quickly. "Good morning, love," Mom said gently to him. "Have a seat, I'll bring you a bowl, all right?" When he didn't reply, Mom and Zephyr shared a short look. They weren't sure Dad heard her, not even when he sat down at that table. His mind looked like it was racing, which Zephyr could sympathize with. So they quietly finished preparing breakfast and let him think. Mom fixed him a bowl of porridge, apples, and honey, and set it in front of him while squeezing his shoulder. "Eat up," she encouraged. Dad seemed to snap out of his trance, looking down at the bowl in front of him in surprise. He blinked and looked up into Mom's patient eyes. "Oh. Thank you, love." Mom smiled and kissed his head as Dad glanced around the room, reaching absent-mindedly for his spoon. His eyes fell on Zephyr, and he said, "Morning, sweetheart," to her as he turned to his porridge. He took one bite before he looked up at Zephyr again, a little confused. "You're already dressed," he stated. Zephyr raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I couldn't sleep so I got up for an early walk." "Around the village," he clarified, taking another bite. Zephyr froze. "Well, yeah, a little. And in the woods a bit." Dad froze this time. "How far?" he asked slowly. Zephyr used the excuse of filling her own bowl of porridge to turn her back to her father. Just the southwest corner of the island and back." Silence. This wasn't going to be good. "That's entirely out of the village," he finally said. That was kind of the point, Zephyr thought, but she knew better than to say that out loud. So she silently added some berries and a touch of honey to her porridge instead. "Please at least tell me you went with someone and not by yourself," he added. Zephyr flinched. "Not exactly." Dad sighed heavily. "Zephyr, after everything that happened yesterday, how could you have thought that was a good idea? What if someone found you? I thought there weren't any stowaways on any of the ships." Zephyr recalled, a little confused herself now. They could have followed the wing maidens here. But there were scouts all over the perimeter, they would have alerted everyone if they saw another ship. And if the scouts didn't see the ship? If they snuck on the island and ambushed us in the night like they did to the wing maidens? Zephyr shifted uncomfortably, trying to busy herself with her breakfast. "Well, they didn't." Stunned silence followed, until her father stuttered, "They didn't." "That's your..." He paused, Zephyr guessed to compose himself. After a moment he ordered, "Get together the members of council when you're done. And stay in the village. I have to check in with Atali and then I'll meet everyone at the Great Hall." He stood from the table and walked back upstairs, leaving Zephyr and her mother in an uncomfortable silence. She heard her mother take a deep breath. "Zeph, he's just..." "I'm good," Zephyr said quickly, turning around with a big smile smeared across her face. All good. I'm just going to go eat this outside, get some fresh air, and then I'll be off. She walked outside with her bowl and a spoon before her mother had a chance to reply. She didn't even give her mother a chance to say anything after she finished her porridge and ran inside to set her dishes in the wash bin. She ran right back outside with a quick, "I'll see you at the Great Hall," shouted over her shoulder. She exhaled heavily. Well, that definitely could have gone better. She tried to tell herself Dad was just stressed, that everything that happened yesterday was unexpected and had a lot of potentially dangerous implications. He's just on edge, that's all. But it didn't stop the tightness in her chest. Why was he so upset anyway? Nothing happened, everyone was fine, and I didn't even run into anyone. Which says more about the Night Scouts than anything else. She peeked her head into the forge to let Grandpappy Gobber know where she and her dad would be for the day and to check in on Nuffink's new apprenticeship. Spro was sticking close to Nuffink, seeming a little lost and unsure what to do if he couldn't follow Dad around. Thankfully, Nuffink and Gobber didn't seem to mind having him around the forge, and gave him small, simple tasks to keep him busy. So Zephyr went off to find Irette. I'm not stupid, it's not like I went out looking for danger this morning. I just went to my hideaway, somewhere no one would have found me. And it's not like I went all the way to the northern side of the island. The village is on the southeastern side, and my hideaway is on the southwestern. That's not that far. She found Irette at the lookout, checking in with and rotating out the scouting teams. He had been expecting to hear when the council meeting would begin, so he said he would finish up and head right to the Great Hall. Which meant Zephyr was off to find Uncle Fishlegs. Okay, but even if I did run into someone, I could have held my own. Wait, no, I didn't take my axe with me this morning. Well, Dad doesn't need to know that. Fishlegs was already busy gathering Dad's maps from the archive, so he didn't really need Zephyr to tell him to meet in the Great Hall. He also said he had already talked to Rough Nut, so that was one less person to find. So that just left Tough Nut and Snotlout. Which Zephyr guessed she would find them in the same place. So off to Tough Nut's healing hut she went. Zephyr peeked her head into one of the side rooms. Tough Nut was fussing over the brunette wing maiden who seemed to have suffered the worst injuries, and Snotlout was sitting beside her, holding her hand. She cleared her throat quietly, causing Snotlout to jump slightly. "Hey, Uncle Snotlout, could I talk to you outside for a second?" she asked quietly. He nodded and glanced once more to the Wind Maiden and Tough Nut before slowly standing and following Zephyr outside. She led him behind the healing hut out of earshot from anyone passing by before turning around. "Dad wants council to meet in the Great Hall as soon as possible so we can talk about some of this stuff before he calls for the whole tribe." Snotlout nodded absent-mindedly, gaze drifting back to the healing hut. "Yeah, okay, I'll be there in a minute." Zephyr nodded slowly. "How's she doing?" Snotlout didn't look at her, seemingly distracted. She's all right, I think. Tough Nut says she should be fine. Might have some bad scars but she should live." "Good, good. And how are you?" Snotlout gave her a confused look. "Me? I'm fine." Zephyr nodded. "Good, that's good." And then she pulled her fist back to punch him in the arm. "Ow. Zephyr!" Snotlout quietly cried, grasping his bicep where she punched him. "What was that for? What's her name?" She remembered he said it, but she couldn't remember what it was now. "Excuse me. What is her name?" Zephyr repeated impatiently. "Why does that ow? Minden." Snotlout caved after she smacked his arm. "Minden, that's right. Is that her?" Zephyr pointed to the healing hut. "Is who what?" "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "Minden, is that her?" "Zephyr, what are you talking about?" Zephyr crossed her arms. "Is she the one you've been in love with for only the gods know how long?" Snotlout froze. What are you talking about?" Zephyr's face slowly revealed a smile. "Oh my gods. She is, isn't she?" "Zephyr," he warned. "So you do know her well, don't you?" "Zephyr, How long has it been since you've seen her?" "Zephyr. What? He looked like he wanted to argue against her point, but something in her face made him stop. He sighed instead. How did you know? Did your dad tell you? Dad knows. Snotlout groaned. I don't know, he knows what happened between her and me in general. He didn't say anything to you? Zephyr shook her head. Snotlout scrubbed his face with his hands and sat down in the grass against the wall of the hut. How did you know? He asked again, looking up to her with a withering glance. Zephyr shrugged as she joined him on the ground. It's me, Louty. That, and you're the only one that never talks about their love life. No one else talks about your love life, either. Even Uncle Toughnut jokes that Gothai was the only woman for him. She shrugged helplessly again. I just... Anytime something comes up, you change the subject or walk away or just get really quiet and I saw your face when they carried her off the ship, and you just... You looked so defeated. When you called out her name, I've never heard you sound so broken. She looked at her uncle carefully. I just kind of put the pieces together. Snotlout nodded slowly, but stayed quiet. After a moment, Zephyr asked carefully, how long has it been? She saw the corner of his mouth twitch up slightly. Gods, I don't even know. That was a few years before Grimmel and moving here. He shook his head slightly as he thought. 20 years, maybe. Somewhere around there. Maybe more. She hesitated a moment, but eventually asked quietly, so? What did happen between you two? Snotlout sighed heavily. Hiccup and I went to Wingmaiden Island while the rest of the riders went to an island called Caldera Key. Mala's old tribe. Zephyr vaguely recalled the name from stories she was told and maps she'd looked over. Snotlout nodded. We had just found out someone we trusted as an ally for years had turned traitor. We were gathering allies and stashing these things called dragon eye lenses to hide them from the dragon hunters and prepare for an attack. Again, something Zephyr vaguely remembered hearing about. She thought about asking for more information about them, but that wasn't important right now. Snotlout sighed. Atali had asked Minden to stay and defend the island. Minden. She felt betrayed, like Atali didn't think she was good enough to help at the meeting. Like she was chosen for the lesser job. He scoffed half-heartedly. Back then, I always felt Hiccup did the same to me. Always picking Astrid for the more important jobs and giving me something else to keep me busy. So I tried to help her. The island was attacked late that night. They set a fire on the opposite side of the island as a diversion. Minden didn't realize it and took all the guards with her to fight the fire. I tried to tell her it wasn't a good idea, but she was determined to show her worth. Just after we got the last of it out, there was an explosion on the mountain above the village. Hiccup and Atali were the only two left over there. Snotlout scrubbed his face. He leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. Atali was injured while scolding Minden. We hid in a cave. Hiccup asked if they had any dragon eye lenses on the island that the hunters would be looking for. She said no, but I knew she was lying. She decided that instead of telling Hiccup, she'd go get the lens herself before the hunters could. I tried to talk her down, but Snotlout smiled ruefully. She's a feisty one. So instead I went with her. We slipped out while Hiccup was tending to Atali and her dragon and managed to nab the lens. He shook his head. By the time we came back, Hiccup was fighting off some of the hunters on his own. He ended up captured, along with Toothless. So now it was just Minden and me to defend the island, the tribe, and their dragons. His face hardened. And Minden blamed it all on herself. Atali, Hiccup, the attack, all of it. She gave me her dragon and walked off. Said she'd be a wingmaiden no longer. That she didn't deserve to be. He chuckled. And then her dragon picked me up and dragged me to where she was. Gods, Zephyr, I'd never seen someone so defeated. I mean, Hiccup when Stoic died, sure, but for all the times I disobeyed Hiccup back then, I felt bad, yeah, but Minden was far past that. She tried to quit, and not because it was an easy option like I did multiple times. But because she thought she screwed up so bad that they would honestly be better leaderless than under her command. And partially because of what I said. What do you mean? Zephyr quietly asked. Snotlout scoffed at himself. Because I had told her she was passed over for a blonde. Zephyr bit her lip. Commenting was not the smart option at the moment. Snotlout scoffed again. Exactly. Eventually I talked her down, helped her see that if she cared that much about the tribe then she shouldn't just leave them. He smiled a little. I guess it worked, because she kissed me after that. First and last time a woman ever kissed me, actually. Zephyr huffed a laugh, enjoying the shift in her uncle's tone. Anyway, Snotlout continued, still smiling, she called her dragon back to her with this specific call and it gave us an idea. We were able to bust out Hiccup and keep the hunters distracted until backup came and scared the rest of them off. He shrugged. We left the next morning after the lenses were hidden. Zephyr waited for him to continue, but he didn't. Wait, that's it. He nodded. Pretty much. Why didn't you say anything to her? He bit his lip. Well, it was all so new then. I mean, it had only been a day. I saw her once after that, briefly. We went back to move the lenses out of precaution and ended up stuck there for a few days because one of the baby razor whips accidentally bonded with Rough Nut. Did you tell her then? Well, not in so many words, he grumbled. Zephyr waited. Snotlout sighed and rolled his eyes. You know how it took so long for Legs and Rough to get pregnant? Zephyr's eyebrows pinched together. Yeah, but what does that? Let's just say Rough was even less of the motherly type than she was even 10 years ago. Okay, so. He leaned over, leaning against his knees. He looked so much more like a teenager than he did the 37-year-old battle-hardened man he actually was. Look, I'm not saying I blame Rough Nut. Honestly, she probably saved my ass. But we spent so much time trying to help her bond with the baby razor whip that I only managed to see Minden twice, both for very brief periods of time. And then it was time to go, and, he shrugged. I only saw her once after that, and it was in the middle of the battle for the King of Dragons when the Wing Maidens showed up to our aid. Zephyr's heart ached for her uncle. Why didn't you ever do anything about it? He shrugged. She had her duties as a Wing Maiden. I wasn't going to pull her away from that. And men can't permanently live on their island, so, he sighed. It was just easier to keep it to myself. And you never found anyone else? Snotlout smiled sadly and looked at Zephyr. No one could beat her. She bit her lip. What are you going to do about it now? He chuckled just as sadly. Not get my hopes up until I know what Atali decides to do. She grimaced. I guess that's fair. He looked at her out of the corner of his eyes. Hey, Zephyr, can we just keep this between you and me for now? She smiled at him understandingly and leaned her head on his shoulder. Don't worry, Louty. Your secret's safe with me. She smiled to herself. Just promise me you'll do something about it this time. Snotlout chuckled. We'll see. What about you and that Eason kid? Zephyr's eyes widened and her cheeks flushed bright red. She stood up quickly. We really should get going, they are going to start the meeting as soon as Dad gets there. He smiled and shook his head, standing up and brushing off his pants. All right, all right. You go ahead, I'm going to let Tough Nut know. I'll be right behind you. She nodded and started her way back to the Great Hall as Snotlout snuck back into the healing hut. But as she focused her attention on the meeting at hand, her chest tightened. The information shared at this meeting could mean major changes needed to be put in place around the island, including preparations for battle. Zephyr had never seen times of conflict in her life, a fact that many of her opposers will not let her forget. So she had no idea what to expect out of those battle preparations. But since Newburgh hadn't seen battle since it was first settled, no one else did either. Long story short, this was either about to go very well, or very, very bad. Chapter 12, Betrayed. Notes. Here we go. So many thanks to my awesome beta for putting up with my crap every week. As always, feel free to let me know what y'all think. We're starting to get into the plot now and I'm really excited. Enjoy. ****TW, General descriptions of battle, description of fallen fighters ****. Chapter text. When Hiccup walked into the great hall, a lot of eyes suddenly turned his direction. It sent shivers down his spine. He hadn't seen such a reaction to his presence since they first came to this island. But he didn't have time to dwell on it, there were much more important matters at hand. He walked directly to the larger of the meeting rooms, finding Fishlegs, Roughnut, Irette, Atterley, Zephyr, and Snotlout already gathered around the long table. They quieted as Hiccup entered, waiting for him to speak and watching him carefully. Hiccup suppressed another shiver. It had been years since he saw his tribe so uncertain. "We'll get started shortly," he began. Astrid is dropping Willow off to Runner and grabbing Valka. Gobber is going to stay at the fort and keep the boys busy. Any word on Tough Nut? He's on his way. He was waiting to make sure Minden was stable. Snotlout jumped in. Hiccup nodded. Good. Take it easy then for now. Fishlegs, Atterley, let's start looking at that map of Wingmaiden Island. Fishlegs nodded and pulled the Wingmaiden Island map forward as Hiccup walked up to the table. Atterley stood at Hiccup's opposite side. Hiccup glanced up to find Snotlout talking with Zephyr across the table. His eyes were dark and sad, and he looked just about as terrible as Hiccup felt. "How is Minden this morning, by the way?" he asked Snotlout. Snotlout sighed. "She's better. She's been asleep since we got her arm splinted. But Tough Nut said that's okay because she lost so much blood." He shrugged and smiled. "She's tough, she'll be all right. I believe that," Hiccup said, making sure his eyes locked with Snotlout's. Snotlout half smiled and nodded slightly. "Thanks, Cause." Hiccup nodded and turned back to the map. "All right, let's get started, then. Tell us what you remember, Atterley." Atterley scanned the map, shaking her head slowly. "Unfortunately, that isn't much. We were ambushed late in the night, and most of my Wingmaidens were asleep. We had sentries, of course, but the enemies had timed their approach adequately enough that the sentries had not seen them right away. They had approached from the southern side of the island." Atterley pointed to the beach they made landfall on, "and the sentries had just enough time to warn the rest of the tribe of an incoming threat." She slid her finger across the map to the eastern side of the island, where their village was located. "By that point, the enemies had reached our shores. We were still mobilizing, and the mothers being on the northern side of the island weren't immediately present to help. But we had some time, considering the warriors didn't attack right away." "Hold on," Astrid interrupted, standing next to Zephyr and peering at the map from across the table. She and Valka had entered the room about halfway through Atterley's explanation. "Why wouldn't they attack right away? Were they trying to be peaceful?" "Because they didn't do a very good job." Atterley grimaced, her eyes darkening. "I sincerely wish that had been their intent. Our best assumption is they weren't aware humans inhabited the island. Once their forces disembarked the vessel, one of the men in charge told them to hunt down the dragons." The room fell deadly silent. But then Tough Nut burst in, making everyone jump. "Woo! What'd I miss?" Snotlout blinked. "Someone tried to steal razor whips," he explained, a little shocked. Tough Nut chuckled. "Joke's on them, razor whips are terrifyingly deadly. I mean, what creature cries acid? Don't changelings spit acid?" Zephyr piped up. "That's different," Tough Nut clarified. "They do that instead of breathing fire. Razor whips breathe fire and cry acid tears." Hiccup sighed and dropped his head. Best to let Tough Nut get it all out now. But Snotlout interrupted. "How's Minden?" "Good, she's good. A lot better than before. She's still asleep, but she's not trying to thrash around like last night. I left her with one of our helpers." "Who'd you leave her with?" Rough Nut asked. Tough Nut snorted indignantly. "Inga. Duh. I'm not stupid." He chuckled to himself, but then after a pause, added, "Wait, we like Minden, right? We wanna keep her around and stuff. Because if I read into that wrong I can have Gunnar relieve Inga." At this point, Hiccup just wanted to see where all of this was going. Especially when every pair of eyes in the room, Valka and Irette included, turned directly to Snotlout. Snotlout glanced around looking uncomfortable with the sudden attention. He locked eyes with Zephyr, who crossed her arms and raised her eyebrows. Snotlout groaned. Oh, come on. It can't be that obvious. Dude, it's gross. You're almost as bad as Hiccup was when Astrid refused to marry him. Alright, Hiccup was done now. Can we get back to the big important reason we called this meeting in the first place, please? Tough Nut shrugged. Suit yourself. But I believe that proves my point, he added in Snotlout's direction, to which Snotlout rolled his eyes. Hiccup rolled his as well and turned back to Atali. So you think they believed only the dragons were on the island? Yes, Atali began again slowly, eyeing Tough Nut a bit incredulously. She shook her head and turned back to Astrid. Yes, they were shocked when they saw us at first. When we realized they weren't aware of our presence, we tried to use that to our advantage. We were able to pacify a handful of the hunters, but one slipped away and alerted the lead. She sighed. And then the fighting began. What was their approach? Astrid asked. That's the problem. They didn't have much of one at all. Not a coordinated one, at least. What do you mean? Hiccup asked. Atali shrugged. Just that. They didn't have a coordinated approach. Once the lead was made aware of our presence, he redirected the rest of the hunters' attention to us and ordered them to attack. They were a little unsure, perhaps, but eventually they all redirected their attention to us. Must be a small tribe, then Astrid mused aloud. Actually, we were vastly outnumbered, Atali corrected. Snotlout chuckled, but then saw how serious Atali looked and quieted. Wait, are you serious? Atali nodded tiredly. Actually, the fact that they vastly outnumbered us may have been the sole reason the fighting lasted for nearly 3 days. 3 days? Tough Nut chimed in. Nearly, yes, Atali confirmed. Just when we would think we may have gained the upper hand, they would send out more hunters so the ones we were fighting could slip away. They found the Razor Whip mothers by the evening of the first full day. When the mothers started attacking, I was forced to direct the small group of wing maidens with the newborns to protect them. But the mothers seemed to startle enough of the hunters to allow us the upper hand again. Though each new wave of hunters would wear us down enough that we couldn't seem to entirely overpower them. New wave? What do you mean by that? Fishlegs asked. Hiccup started pulling out a journal and some charcoal, scribbling notes as Atali continued to speak. Initially, we thought they had a decent army at their disposal. But the hunters were easily frightened, and we began to think the fighting would be over quite quickly. But as hunters began retreating to the ship, more would disembark, in nearly the same numbers as had initially ventured onto the island. And the cycle repeated many more times throughout the day. For Thor's sake, how many fighters did they have? Astrid asked. Atali shrugged tiredly. We lost count quite quickly. Hiccup shook his head as he looked down at the few notes he had. Immense numbers, easily frightened army, sending fighters out in waves rather than all at once, no coordinated attack pattern. It didn't make any sense to him. He scrubbed his face with the heel of his left hand, charcoal still balanced between his fingers. Okay, so how long did the fighting last, exactly? And where did Toothless come in? Toothless? Astrid gasped. Wait, Toothless was there? Snotlout asked at the same time. You actually saw Toothless? Tough Nut added in simultaneously. Did you say Toothless? Fishlegs clarified, rounding out the chorus of shock. Rough Nut stood silently next to Fishlegs with her mouth slightly ajar. Let me explain, Atali requested. As much as Hiccup wanted to hear about Toothless and how he fit into all of this, he couldn't help but notice how worn Atali already looked. He started to suggest they take a break, but Atali pushed on anyway. We continued fighting into the second day. We barely managed to keep ahead of the enemy, and if it wasn't for the Razor Whip mothers fighting alongside us, we would have suffered a great defeat long before then. While trying to keep track of the mothers, since we knew that was what the enemy was there for, we realized one was missing. We feared they had captured her and fought harder against them. Minden decided to push her way to the ship to see if she could locate the missing mother. Atali turned to Snotlout with apologetic eyes. I am so sorry, Snotlout. Once she learned a mother was missing, there There was nothing you could do, Snotlout quietly finished for her. He half smiled with tears in his eyes. I wouldn't expect any less from my wing maiden. Atali nodded solemnly, slowly continuing. We barely got her off the ship before more wing maidens were injured as badly as she was. And with one of our best down, we started feeling a little hopeless. We tried to retreat into the mountain to regroup in the evening, but with how severe many of the injuries were, it was difficult. I nearly surrendered. Atali's voice cracked, and she bit her lip and squeezed her eyes shut. Everyone was silent as a few tears escaped her eyes. Astrid and Hiccup shared a heartbreaking glance. Atali was one of the strongest people they knew. No one had ever seen her cry. No one had ever seen her upset, let alone this destroyed. Astrid swiftly straightened and practically ran around the table, wrapping a gentle arm around Atali's shoulders with a supportive squeeze. It took Atali a few moments to recover, but eventually she found the strength to continue. I nearly surrendered for the sake of my tribe. In the hopes of saving what little we had left. Hoping they would be allowed to go free if I gave myself up. I had just started to walk out of the mouth of the cave when we saw the dragons flying in at an alarming speed. The missing Razor Whip mother was at the head of the group. Atali looked directly at Hiccup. Toothless was directly on her flank. And a group of light furies followed closely behind. How did she find the hidden world? Fishlegs asked. Maybe Toothless wasn't in the hidden world. Astrid suggested, sounding very unsure of herself. Hiccup shook his head. The Razor Whips were the only dragons that weren't in the hidden world. He wouldn't exactly have a reason to be out and about. Who said he needs a reason? Tough Nut offered. I mean, do I need a reason to walk around naked in my hut at night? Absolutely not. Zephyr, Snotlout, Rough Nut, and Fishlegs all made faces varying from disgust to horror, but Hiccup was too focused to pay attention to Tough Nut right now. Mom. Any suggestions? Valka shrugged unhelpfully. Well, he's your dragon. You know him better than any of us. You'd have the best guess. He was my dragon, Hiccup painfully corrected. Valka raised an eyebrow. Do you honestly believe that, son? That he suddenly stopped being your dragon just because he isn't with you? Hiccup gave her a look that said you're clearly not helping, to which Valka shrugged again. She looked all too pleased with herself. So Hiccup sighed and racked his brain for any sort of explanation. Okay, well, obviously the Razor Whip went off to find help. Maybe she used a distress call, got close enough to the hidden world that Toothless was able to hear it, and he rounded up some light furies. Makes enough sense. The light furies seemed to be an escort force of sorts. We always saw them leading and flanking dragons to the hidden world when they used to fly over. That still doesn't explain how she knew where to go, Fishlegs argued. Hiccup rubbed his forehead with his fingers. Instinct. Maybe, but then why would the Light Furies have had to lead all the other dragons to the hidden world? Maybe they weren't, maybe they were solely protection. Sure, but you'd think that if instinct could lead the dragons there, we'd have seen more rogue dragons making their way on their own. We'll talk through it later, Legs. Atali, what happened when Toothless showed up? Things went fairly quickly after that. The Light Furies gathered the Razor Whip mothers, and together they followed Toothless' lead to run the hunters off the island or to various hideaways. Some went back to the ship they sailed on. We saw at least a handful attempt to swim to a small island nearby, but we aren't sure if they succeeded. Eventually, the dragons either ran off or defeated enough of the attacking forces. Atali's eyes flickered to Hiccup, but then she dropped her head. Toothless. We knew the babies were no longer safe after many of the hunters tried to take them directly from our backs. He called the mothers to take them. We had time for only brief goodbyes before helping them onto the mothers' backs. Once the mothers were airborne, he and a few Light Furies managed to help us apprehend enough ships to hold my tribe. And then, Atali paused and wiped another tear from her cheek. And then they set the island ablaze. The room stilled to a haunting silence. A few glances were shared, but for the most part everyone simply bowed their heads. Wing Maiden Island was destroyed. For the best, of course. The island held so many secrets of dragons, of Razor Whips specifically, that leaving it to this new enemy to raid would have been far too dangerous. Who knows what they could have found? But all the knowledge, the history and the entire culture of the Wingmaiden tribe was just gone. Nothing was left but the spears and armor still scattered on the boats beneath Newburgh, and the brave women who would be the last to ever fulfill the sacred duty they valued so much. And entire culture, the last connection between humans and dragons living in harmony in this world. It was all gone. Atali, Hiccup breathed. I am so sorry. I can't even. It's all right, she quietly interrupted. The safety of the mothers and babies, the well-being of my tribe. That is what is most important to me. I can only thank the gods we suffered no casualties on our side, nor the dragons. She could insist it was fine as much as she wanted. Hiccup still saw the gut-wrenching pain in her eyes. The kind of pain that could only be felt when making a decision to destroy the life you used to know in order to protect the people that counted on you, the people you loved. It was the same pain Hiccup felt when he uprooted his own tribe from their home of 7 generations nearly 20 years ago. And Hiccup was sure she would never forget that pain, because those 20 years did nothing to dull his own pain. Atali's eyes filled with tears, and she dropped her head quickly. Hiccup's heart broke. He stood straighter, clearing his throat so his words sounded more sure and steady. Council. All those in favor of absorbing the Wingmaiden tribe and offering them a home here on Newburgh, either separate from our own or integrated into the hairy hooligans, whichever Chief Atali decides is best for her women, say aye. The answer was obvious to Hiccup, and he knew the rest of council would agree. But he had to offer up the official vote. The former riders rang out instantly with a strong if staggered chorus of aye, making Hiccup smile sadly. Astrid squeezed Atali's shoulders and whispered, "Your family to us. Please don't forget that." Hiccup turned to his mother. "Aye," she said. He turned to Eret, who agreed with a strong "aye" as well. He turned to his daughter. "Zephyr. Your vote?" Zephyr blinked. "Me? Yes." She looked around at the expectant eyes falling on her. "But I'm not a council member." "You're my successor," Hiccup explained with a small smile. "And now that the announcement has been made officially, your opinion matters to us. If you have one, of course." Zephyr tried to shake off the shock. "Aye," she said bewilderedly. "Yes. Of course." Hiccup nodded his head and turned to Atali, reaching up with his left hand to squeeze her shoulder supportively. "The only vote we're missing is Gobber, but even if he did vote no for whatever reason, he's extremely outnumbered. You don't have to answer now, but your tribe will always have a home here if you choose to accept the offer. You and I can work out details later, when you're ready. But please, for now, at least accept my offer of sanctuary. We'll get your women back to health and provide food and shelter for as long as you need." Atali swallowed and pursed her lips as tears fell freely down her cheeks. She threw her arms around Hiccup, who embraced her tightly back without hesitation. He tried desperately to hold back his own tears as she whispered, "Thank you, Hiccup." He smiled at her as she pulled back. "Of course." He cleared his throat. "Is there anything else we should know now about the attack?" Atali swiped at the tear stains on her cheeks. "One ship did try to follow us, but the Light Furies and Toothless held them back until we were out of sight. They are all right," she added, seeing the worry in Hiccup's eyes. "They caught up with us quickly. We saw the Razor Whips with them. Most of the Light Furies continued on, I assume to the hidden world, with the Razor Whips in their protection. Toothless and 2 of the Light Furies guided us in the proper direction towards your island, and left when they were satisfied we were on the right track." Hiccup chuckled sadly. "That's my dragon, all right," he whispered, glancing to his mother who smiled back at him. Hiccup Atali continued, "I know they held off our attackers from following, but I still. We'll stay on high alert for a while, Atali. You have my word." He lowered his head slightly and locked his eyes with hers. "You and your tribe have done incredible. Rest, take advantage of being under our care, and let me handle the protection for a while, all right?" Atali sighed, but nodded. "All right." Hiccup squeezed her shoulder again before turning to the rest of the room. "You heard the warrior. Snotlout, Eret, keep scouts patrolling the island at all times and keep that lookout tower mained. Make sure they report everything to you both, no matter how insignificant it sounds. We need to make sure we overanalyze everything for a few weeks at least. Astrid, don't hate me, but Wing made an ambassador duty, she sighed with a knowing smile. It's all right, I knew it was coming. Hiccup smiled at her apologetically. I love you. She rolled her eyes playfully. Love you, too, I guess. He chuckled and shook his head at her while turning to fish legs. You and I need to do some research, see if there's anything we can find out about this new threat. We'll have to start asking the Wing Maidens some questions once they're well enough if Atali will let us. I'll make sure the archives are ready, he said. Tough Nut, how are we looking with supplies and all that? Should be fine, Tough Nut said slowly, clearly racking his brain. Now that everyone's taken care of, I need to do a full inventory though. Let me know what you need after that, then. Everyone else, make sure the Wing Maidens have what they need, and come to me with any problems immediately. Anything else for the greater good. He gave everyone in the room adequate time to speak, but everyone shook their heads. All right, Hiccup sighed. Dismissed. He waited a moment while everyone began to file out, keeping his eyes down on the map and notes he had in front of him. And then took a deep breath. He didn't want to do this. But he knew he had to. Zephyr. May I have a word with you? Out of the corner of his eye, he saw her freeze at her name and slowly turn. A few of the others glanced back, making Hiccup wonder if they knew what was coming, but continued out of the meeting space. Astrid paused a little longer than the rest but eventually left with Atali. Zephyr hesitated a moment before making her way back towards the table. He could tell she was holding her elbow in her opposite hand across the front of her body. It reminded Hiccup of the shy little Zephyr he knew from years ago, when she was still small enough to perch on his shoulder as they patrolled the village. And how in many ways, she was still that shy little girl. You disobeyed a direct order, he began, voice harder than he had intended, despite the crack in his voice on the first words. An order? What do you? Yes, Zephyr, an order. He interrupted. His voice bounced off the walls and sounded even more intimidating, but he couldn't bring his voice down. Was it really that loud? Or was it just that loud in his head? I told you to take your brothers home, to find your mother and your sister, and protect them. And instead, you argued with me in front of the whole tribe. I wanted to help. Zephyr defended, stamping her foot like a child. Gods, she was just a child. She was a child. A child with no experience on the battlefield, with no idea what it's like to see people that you knew from the time you could breathe fall next to you. She had no business running into a battle. And that was why Hiccup screamed at himself that he had to do this. So he pushed himself to continue. And I told you how you could help. By taking your mother and siblings home. By protecting them there. If they needed protection so bad, then why couldn't nothing do it so I could help you? Because I didn't need you there. It was only 3 ships, we had enough manpower to handle it. Then why did they need me to protect them? Gods, she was so stubborn. Because that's what I asked of you. I don't understand why you didn't want me there. Suddenly, Hiccup felt a blast of cold air chill his skin. Why couldn't nothing handle them so I could stay with you? He could hear the crunch of the snow at the base of the glacier beneath his feet. I just wanted a chance to learn. He saw the black mass of fire and scales creeping steadily towards him, eyes decreased to savage slits. If I'm going to be a chiefess, I need that experience. The high-pitched screech winding up, the low gruff voice calling his name, a large figure jumping in front of him, the bright flash of purple. He slammed his fist on the table. Damn it, Zephyr, because I want you to live long enough to see that day. Zephyr froze in front of him. You are 14 years old, you will have plenty of time to get that experience. After you've had the proper training. Sparring with nothing is not the same as fighting a grown Viking to the death. And we didn't even know what was coming for us. We knew 3 ships were approaching the island and that was it. I'm not sending my daughter into a battlefield, and I sure as hell am not doing it blind. He stood tall, breathing heavy. He noticed fear in his daughter's eyes, because he never raised his voice at his children, but he couldn't soften it. He tried, but he couldn't. All he could see was Zephyr falling amidst a flash of purple, too. Just like his father did. At his own hands. Do you understand? His voice was low and rough. The room was silent. Do you understand me? He yelled, leaning towards her. Yes, she squeaked just loud enough for Hiccup to hear. His heart shattered at how weak her voice sounded. Oh, she was his little warrior, all right. She was the strong, confident girl he had raised her to be. Until the man who spent her whole life building her up shut her down in an instant. He wanted to run across the room to her. To hug her, to apologize, to tell her everything was going to be okay, that he was just scared, that he believed in her but just wanted his baby girl to be safe. But he couldn't. He couldn't get the image out of his head. He couldn't fight past the thought of her limp body, drained of blood and paler than the moon, eyes lifeless and chest still, mangled and laying in the middle of a battlefield because he wasn't strong enough to put his foot down. So instead, all he managed to saw was, dismissed, his voice cracking and breaking as he breathed the two syllables. He kept his eyes closed and his head down, unable to face the pain in his daughter's eyes. But it didn't matter. Those pained eyes were already seared into his brain. The room was still and silent long enough that Hiccup wondered if he had missed the sound of her footsteps retreating. But then he heard her soft voice whisper, "I'm sorry, Daddy," followed closely by her quick footsteps fading away as the door swung shut on its hinges behind her. Hiccup was able to hold his stance until he was pretty sure she had left the great hall entirely. And then he collapsed into his chair. He groaned and caught his head in his hands, letting the pain eat him away. "Gods, Dad," he cried and looked up to the sky, not bothering to wipe away the tears as they escaped his eyes. He deserved that pain. He deserved more than that pain for what he just did to his baby girl. "Dad, how did you do it?" Chapter 13, Waiting for the Next Strike. Notes. Good morning / afternoon / evening, lovely readers. We're getting the chapter a little early today. I'm nannying every Friday now, at least for the semester, so posting time will vary a bit as it'll have to coincide with nap time. So expect the chapters to be posted sometime between 9 AM to 11 AM East, which is about 1 to 3 hours earlier than normal. Also, gentle reminder that next week will be the last weekly update before we switch to bi-weekly. Enjoy. Edit. Due to some unexpected personal issues with my physical health on top of university work, I unfortunately won't be able to have the chapter ready by posting time. Sadly, that means I have to move up the beginning of the switch to bi-weekly updates. So expect the next chapter 2 weeks from this one, instead of the 11th of September. Since this was an unexpected change, I will post a teaser at the normal time on my Tumblr page, https://foreverythingels.tumblr.com. So sorry for the sudden change, and I will see you all on the 11th of September. Chapter text. Astrid was exhausted. Her feet ached with each step, her back screamed with each twist and bend, and she was still trying to fight off some of that early pregnancy nausea. But that didn't matter. She could fight through it. She had to make sure the wing maidens were alright first. This baby was much kinder to her body than nothing had been anyway. She could handle it. But after a week of running around and making sure they were all taken care of and nobody had developed fevers, even she had to admit that she was getting worn down. Of course she kept pushing herself, even when Hiccup had tried to tell her she'd done enough and needed to take it easy. But she already couldn't help much with the war preparations. The only thing Hiccup let her do was sit in on the meetings and talk out the logistics. But the problem was, there weren't many logistics to talk out. They knew nothing of this new threat. They didn't know where they came from, what they were after, besides the obvious, dragons, what they know, or what resources they had at their disposal. In fact, the only thing they did know was that they were down to one, albeit quite large, ship and had numbers of fighters that drastically outnumbered the wing maidens. Which, for a general who couldn't complete any physical work, was absolutely maddening. So to keep herself busy, she drowned herself in helping Tough Nut watch over the injured wing maidens. Though, if she was being honest, she couldn't complain about the front row seat to Snotlout fawning all over Minden. It was nice to see how much he cared about her, to confirm how much they all thought he had matured over the years. And, if she was being honest, it was nice to see them reconnected after all the time they were apart. It had been so long since he was able to talk about the wing maidens at all, let alone Minden. And if Astrid knew anything about Snotlout's feelings for her, well, she'll just say that she would have been heartbroken if she had gone that long without seeing Hiccup. Then again, the wing maidens all seemed very concerned for Astrid, which made taking care of them a little more difficult. A weak, scratchy voice sounded from behind her. Astrid. She chuckled to herself. Speaking of concerned wing maidens. She turned to the voice and stepped inside the room it came from. What's up, Minden? Do you need something? Need you to sit down, is all she said with a strained laugh from her bed. Why would you want that? I'm fine. Astrid leaned over to fluff Minden's pillow. I'm not stupid, she argued. I see that bump in your tunic. She lightly poked Astrid's stomach for emphasis when she leaned over Minden, but used a finger on her broken arm to do it, which made her suck in a breath through her teeth in pain. Astrid smiled. Remember that next time you try to tease me. Minden tried to smile. Noted, she said through her teeth. Astrid shook her head. Come on, let me see it. She gently untied the cloth from around Minden's neck that held up her arm, trying not to react to how terrifyingly ice-cold her skin was. Stay still, she chided when Minden tried to shift. Hard to do when you're moving my arm that's been snapped in half, Minden bit back. Ah, minor detail, Astrid breathed, keeping her focus on holding Minden's arm as stable as possible. The bandage beneath the sling was alright, soaked in red, enough that the sling was starting to mirror the red stain of the bandage. But the bigger problem was that the red was bright and shiny, which meant it was fresh. Astrid shook her head, concerned. Minden, Tough Nut is going to have to change this bandage. It's already soaked. When did he change this last? This morning. Astrid's stomach turned. It was barely evening now. It shouldn't be bleeding this much after a week. Minden darkly chuckled once at Astrid's silence. Not great, I know. No, it's all right, Astrid tried to reassure her. She knew she wasn't convincing, though. We'll just have to try to wrap it tighter. Stanch the blood flow. Minden sighed and leaned her head back. Don't baby me, Astrid. I know I'm not in good shape. I see Snotlout's face every time he walks in here. Astrid wasn't exactly fond of where this conversation was going. How are you two? You and Snotlout, I mean. Minden rolled her eyes, seeing right through Astrid's distraction, but played along anyway. It is nice to see him again. It's been years. Astrid nodded her head, tying the sling behind Minden's neck again. He's missed you. Really? Minden asked nonchalantly, but Astrid could have sworn there was an underlying hint of interest. Yeah, I think so. He gets all mopey when we talk about your tribe. Tough Nut brought you up once to tease him and Snotlout punched him in the face. Minden chuckled weakly. Sounds like the Snotlout I know. Astrid nodded, turning her attention to Minden's other injuries. How's the head? Screaming. That black eye looks a lot better though, Astrid offered. Finally, some good news, Minden quipped back. Astrid smiled and shook her head. I think you'll be alright. We just need to get that arm fixed up and then you'll be good as new. Astrid straightened and put her hands on her hips. Maybe next time don't charge blindly onto an enemy ship by yourself, huh? Minden winced. Atali told you about that. Astrid pulled Minden's blanket up to her chin, gently tucking her in like she used to do to Spro when he had nightmares. She told us all at the meeting. Snotlout was very proud, actually, she added with a soft smile. Doesn't mean much, he told me he was proud that I sneezed without wincing yesterday. Hey, that is impressive. Astrid cheered. All right, I'm going to go check on. Astrid, sit. Please. For my sake, so I can stop worrying. Astrid crossed her arms. Are you really in any shape to be giving orders right now? I could threaten to jump out of this bed, Minden suggested. Astrid narrowed her eyes. Even if I believed you really meant that, do you really think you have the energy to sit up, let alone jump out of bed? Minden shrugged her good shoulder. Wouldn't really be smart of you to leave and take the chance. So I guess you have to sit with me. Astrid sighed. Fine. But only until Snotlout gets here. Who said he's coming? Minden asked as Astrid settled in what has been referred to lately as Snotlout's chair. Astrid shrugged. It's almost dinner time. He'll be done for the day, and why would he go home to an empty house when you are here? She waved her eyebrows suggestively. Minden rolled her eyes and kept them closed, but she smiled. On second thought, you can go if you want. And risk you falling out of bed. Oh, absolutely not. Minden chuckled again, but fell quiet after that. Astrid took in how thin and fragile Minden looked even under the blanket. Somehow she looked even paler than she did when she first arrived at Tough Nut's hut. After just that one conversation, she was entirely exhausted. Astrid wasn't a healer, sure, but she wasn't stupid either. This wasn't good. No wonder Snotlout was here every free moment he had. He was probably terrified she'd pass and he wouldn't be here to say goodbye. Minden seemed to read her thoughts. Astrid, she asked again weakly. Yeah, Minden. Minden hesitated before she continued. Be honest with me, because I know Snot and Tough aren't. It's bad, isn't it? Astrid bit her lip and bit back tears. You're going to be fine. Minden looked like she was going to cry too. That's not an answer, she whispered. Astrid didn't know what to say. So she leaned over and grasped Minden's uninjured hand instead. You're not going anywhere. Not if we have anything to say about it. Minden managed to open her eyes a little bit to look at Astrid. Will Tough really have to change this damn dressing already? Astrid smiled sympathetically. I'm afraid so, yeah. Minden sighed and closed her eyes again. I hate that. It hurts so much. Astrid gave her hand a gentle squeeze. I'll make sure Snotlout or I am here with you when he does it, I promise. She smiled jokingly and added, you can break my hand like I broke Hiccups when Zephyr was born. She chuckled. Poor guy. Lost a leg, broke a hand. Hey, the leg was his own failed plan. The hand was payback for the months upon months I carried his daughter inside me. Couldn't have been that bad if you let him do it 4 more times after that, Minden teased. Astrid chuckled. Yeah, well, he loved that little girl so much that I couldn't resist when he asked for more. Oh, I'm sure it had nothing to do with you wanting more, Minden sarcastically agreed. Definitely not, it was all him. Astrid chuckled. Minden smiled, but quieted until another thought occurred to her. Have you spoken to Atali at all? Here and there, yeah. Why? Has she not been in to see you? No, she has. Minden looked up to the ceiling. I guess I'm just wondering what she's planning for us. Where to go next, what to do without the razor whips. She won't tell me. She doesn't want to put unnecessary stress on me while I'm healing. I wondered if she spoke to you or Hiccup about any of it. Astrid pursed her lips. We offered a home for all of you on our island, but no, she hasn't said anything to us. She shook her head slowly. To be honest, I think she's still in a little bit of shock after everything that happened. The best I can guess is that you will all be staying here until she decides, whenever that is. Minden started to say something, but then Snotlout walked in. Hey, how's my girl, he said with a smile. A little sassy this evening, Astrid replied for her, narrowing her eyes in Minden's direction. Minden simply smiled in return. Snotlout chuckled. Good, then she's still herself, it sounds like. Mind if I take over? Astrid gave her one more supportive squeeze of the hand and stood, gesturing to the now empty chair. She's all yours. Thanks, Snotlout said, quickly walking to her side. He leaned over and placed a gentle kiss to Minden's forehead before taking a seat. She smiled at him fondly and lifted her good hand, which he immediately wrapped in his own. Feeling any better today? He asked quietly. Definitely. Ready to go out and fight those bastards that took our island again? She smiled. Snotlout chuckled. Why don't we leave the fighting to someone else for now, okay? Minden sighed playfully. I'll consider it. But only because you asked. I can live with that. Snotlout laughed. Astrid smiled and touched her belly. Suddenly she desperately missed her husband. I'll find out what I can for you, Minden, okay? I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, Astrid, she said. Astrid nodded her head and slipped out the door, but not before she heard Minden quietly ask if Snotlout would lay down with her again and keep her warm. By the gentle creaking of the bed, he must have given in to her. Astrid smiled. She'd have to tease him about that later. But right now, she wanted her own man to wrap his arms around her. She headed straight for home, figuring he'd be there by now judging by how low the sun was. Perhaps he'd started cooking dinner. It seemed to be his favorite way to shake off the stress of the day. But instead she found a fairly empty home, save a pouting teenage girl in the main room brooding in front of the fire. Astrid stifled a sigh. Well, she definitely knew how to set the mood in the room. Hey Zephy, how was your day? Zephyr shrugged. Oh boy. She was still mad, then. What did you do today? Zephyr shrugged. Astrid nodded slowly. All right, good talk. Is anyone else home? Zephyr shrugged. Astrid took a deep breath. Odin, give me strength. Would you like to help me make dinner? Zephyr stood up and muttered, I'll be at the Great Hall, and walked out the front door, leaving Astrid standing alone in an empty house. She huffed. All right. Yeah. Good talk, she said to no one in particular. She wandered around the house for a moment. Hiccup. Nothing. Spro. No response. That's odd. Well, the boys could have been anywhere. But if her husband wasn't home, then there was really only one other place on the island he could be. And she was willing to bet their sons were still stuck there too. So she walked back out of their home and crossed the village, pulling her furs tightly around her. It was still a little early in the season, but the chill of winter was already creeping into the breeze. She prayed the gods would be merciful on them this year. Hiccup didn't need any more surprises. Still, she gladly welcomed the warmth of the forge as she stepped inside the blacksmith's store. And sure enough, Nuffink and Spro were closely watching their grandpappy Gobber work away at a damaged bracing, probably for one of the minor pulleys scattered around the village if Astrid recalled the shape correctly. Spro turned around at the sound of approaching footsteps, and his face lit up as his eyes found Astrid. Hi, Mommy, he cried, running up to her and throwing his arms around her waist. And hi baby, he added. He kissed the bump in her belly and laid his head against it as he hugged her. Astrid's heart swelled. She ran her fingers through his messy mop of dirty blonde hair, already darkening from the lack of the summer sun. Hey, little man. Are you two being good for Grandpappy? Yes, Mommy. We learned how to make a gear today. How exciting. Astrid looked up to Nuffink. Well, it sounds like you two had a big day today. Why don't you head up to the Great Hall and get some dinner, huh? Zephyr is already there, and Grammy, Valka and Willow probably are too by now. Nuffink turned to Gobber, who nodded. Nuffink smiled and jumped down from the bench he had been standing on. Okay. Come on, Spro, I'll race you. Nuffink bolted out of the doorway without waiting for Spro to respond. Hey, no fair. I have little legs. Spro yelled after him. He started running after his brother. Nuffink. Astrid heard him whine once he was out of the door. She chuckled and continued further into the warmth of the forge. He's in there, lassie, Gobber said, gesturing to the back workshop designated for Hiccup with his head. She folded her arms across her chest and glanced back that direction, but continued walking towards Gobber. How long has he been back there? She asked quietly, not wanting Hiccup to hear. Gobber shrugged. Most of the day, I'd reckon. Astrid sighed. Is he still beating himself up about Zephyr? Probably. Gobber sighed too. The boy hasn't spoken since he walked back there. I don't think he even came out for a meal. Astrid rubbed her face with one hand. He's going to kill himself if he keeps working like this. Gobber set down the piece he was working on and leaned in towards her. You and I both know he won't listen to a word anyone says. He pointed to her with his hook hand. No one but you. That's the problem, Gobber. He's too worried about me and the baby to listen to anything I have to say. Well, if you can't get through to him, then Thor help us all. Gobber picked the metal back up and looked it over. He still respects ye, and he respects your opinion. Ye just have to. I know, I know. Put my foot down and not take no for an answer. Make him listen. Gobber smiled at her. Why are ye still here talking to me, then? She smiled at him. Thank you, Gobber. For what, lass? She shrugged. Everything. He nodded to her, and she turned to slip back into Hiccup's workshop. She peeked in to find him hunched over the workbench, sitting down with his elbows holding scattered sketches to the wood, fingers locked in a death grip on his hair. She quietly knocked twice, not wanting to startle him. He jumped up a little anyway and spun around in his chair. Hey, it's just me, she said. You weren't at home, so I figured you'd be here. I just wanted to check on you. Hiccup's brows pinched together. It's a little early for me to be home, isn't it? Astrid crossed the room and laid her hands on his shoulders. If you wait any longer, the sun might set before you get there, love. Hiccup blinked and looked around the room. Is it that late? It is. She massaged his shoulders gently before draping her arms over them and resting her chin on his head. Got a lot on your mind? Hiccup sighed, reaching up with his left hand to gently wrap his fingers around her arm and rub her skin softly with his thumb. I guess, yeah. Have you seen Zephyr today? Astrid pursed her lips. I did. Just before I came to find you, actually. Hiccup hesitated. How is she? Astrid hesitated too. She's fine. Hiccup groaned and flopped down over his desk, making Astrid wince at the light thud his forehead made against the wood. She hates me, doesn't she? I didn't say that. Am I wrong? He asked, his voice muffled by the desk. Astrid started to tell him no, but the word caught in her throat. Exactly. He sat up quickly and spun around. Astrid could see the regret and pain seeping out of his eyes. What was I supposed to do? Asked. Just let her run all over me. She's got a better start on fighting skills than I ever did, but she's not ready for something like that. What if she had gotten hurt? What if she had been killed? Asked. I'd never live with myself, I'd. Hiccup, babe, slow down, she asked, holding her hands up in surrender. I'm not disagreeing with you. You did the right thing. She'll be fine. Hiccup stared at Astrid. He slowly sunk back down into his chair. And then he started to cry. Astrid hadn't seen him cry since the night after Nothing was born too early. Hiccup, she breathed. She pulled him against her chest, holding him tightly. Hiccup, breathe, it's okay. You didn't see her face, Astrid, he choked. You didn't see her go so pale when she saw Minden. You didn't see how she froze. She's just a kid, she shouldn't have to see that kind of stuff. I know, she said, running her fingers through his hair. I know, love. You didn't hear how small she sounded when I yelled at her. She's never going to forgive me. She will, just give her time. But. Hiccup, listen to me, Astrid gently interrupted. She lifted his chin with her finger so he could look into her eyes and swiped away a tear from his cheek. She has grown up admiring everything you do. She's just a little hurt, but she'll understand eventually. She's got both of our prides combined, so only the gods know how long that'll take, she added with a smile, but she will come around eventually. Hiccup chuckled sadly, but his face fell quickly again. She won't even look at me. Then talk to her. Find a middle ground. Show her you still support her. She leaned over to kiss his forehead. She's still your little girl. She still looks up to you, wants to learn from you. Show her you'll give her that chance when she's ready. Hiccup sighed, looking more tired than he had at any point in the last week. I just want her to be safe. I know, Astrid said softly. And someday, she'll see that. Hiccup nodded absent-mindedly, staring off at something behind Astrid's shoulder. She brushed his hair out of his face. She's not home right now, she went to the Great Hall for some food. I sent Nuff and Spro there too. Why don't you and I head back and have a quiet meal together, huh? He considered for a moment before standing and wrapping his arms around her. She sighed happily and laid her head on his chest as he kissed her hair. Yeah, that sounds nice. I'll even cook, if you want. Oh, come on, don't threaten me like that, he teased. She giggled and smiled up at him. He smiled back, if a little sadly, and stole a swift kiss from her lips. Come on, let's get back before the kids do. Hiccup packed up his sketches fairly quickly, and then they start off to their home hand in hand. How's Minden? Hiccup asked. Astrid's face scrunched up in uncertainty. Better in most ways. Maybe not so much in others. He sighed. Atterley and Snotlout said the same thing today. I was hoping she had gotten better since then. Me too. She thought over her conversation with Minden again, and then asked, did Atterley say anything to you about their next steps? In Minden's care? No, if they are staying or not. Oh. No, she didn't. Why? Did she say something to you? No, Minden asked. Hiccup looked surprised. She did. She said Atterley isn't bothering her with any of that until she gets better. They walked in silence for a moment before Hiccup asked, do you think she wants to stay? Atterley? No, Minden. Astrid pondered that possibility for a moment. Huh. Actually, that kind of makes sense. I mean, they did spend most of their lives raising baby dragons from birth. Maybe she realized that's not an option anymore. And she's looking for a new purpose, Hiccup finished for her. Astrid nodded slowly. And maybe she found that new purpose in Snotlout. Hiccup nodded. My thoughts exactly. I mean, at some point they'll have to realize their tribe isn't really sustainable the way it is now. They don't have any men in their ranks. Their recruitment approach was working great for them, Astrid argued. I completely agree, it was. But what would they be recruiting women for now? They don't have razor whips to protect. Astrid sighed. Yeah, that's fair. All I'm saying is that maybe Minden sees that already. Maybe she's already mourning the loss of that bond they always had with their baby razor whips. Astrid nodded, and then chuckled quietly. Can you imagine Snotlout as a father? Could you have imagined me as a father? Hiccup teased. Actually, yes. I always did. Hiccup blushed before turning sad again. Yeah, well, I proved you wrong there, didn't I? No, you didn't, Astrid sternly replied. Hiccup was quiet after that all the way until they reached their home. He opened the door for her, and just as she moved to walk inside, something stark white caught her eye. She saw a large white falcon perched in a nearby tree looking around with something that looked like leather wrapped around its torso. Astrid sighed. Now how in Thor's name did Nothink manage that? Babe, remind me later to talk to Nothink about attempting to dress animals, would you? She asked as she pat his chest with her hand and walked inside. Ah. Okay. Do you want to start cooking the yak chops and I'll cut up the vegetables? Oh, Ast, do you really think it's a good idea for you to be using a knife? Astrid spun around on her heels. Hiccup's face was already bright red and his eyes wide open. She crossed her arms. So help me, if you won't even let me use a knife, the absolute smallest, least threatening sharp object there is, then you had better believe the minute this baby is out of me, I will take my axe head and plunge it through your head. Hiccup swallowed. So I'll go start the yak chops, would you mind cutting the vegetables, milady? Astrid smiled pleasantly and stood on her toes to kiss his cheek. What a great plan, babe. She twirled again and practically floated to the small bench they used for food preparation. She heard Hiccup chuckle behind her before he followed to prepare the meat. But then Zephyr walked in. Well, walked was a little tame for the way she entered. Stormed was probably more accurate. She stepped inside, saw Hiccup and Astrid standing there, and immediately started to walk up the stairs. Zephyr, sweetheart, Hiccup called after her, could you come here for a second? The footsteps continued up the stairs. Zephyr, stoic haddock, do not tell me you walked away from your father when he was talking to you. Astrid yelled without looking up from the vegetables. The footsteps paused, followed by a beat of silence, and then they slowly trudged back down the stairs. Zephyr stopped just barely within sight of where Hiccup and Astrid were standing and hugged her midsection. Sorry, Mom, she whispered. Astrid only pointed to Hiccup with her knife before returning to her cutting. Sorry, Daddy, she added. Astrid could tell Hiccup was incredibly nervous. Gods, he loved that little girl so much. He loved all of his children, of course, but the unique bond he had with each one of them was still something that made Astrid's heart soar every day. "Sweetheart," he began shakily. He cleared his throat and started again. "I know you were really upset that you couldn't help more last week after the warning sounded. It's not that I don't think you can do it. I've seen a lot of things that you haven't. And I worry about you. I worry that if you're not properly prepared, that something will happen to you and it'll be my fault." He swallowed and took a deep breath. "But you are getting older. I was younger than you when my dad started me in dragon training, and I know we haven't been able to give you much training in fighting yet. And that's something that I will always struggle with, because no matter how old you get, you're still my baby girl." Astrid stole a glance at Zephyr and saw tears welling up in her eyes. But she stayed still and tried to remain strong. Hiccup must have seen it too, because he had to pause again before he was able to continue. "But I will work on it. Just like you have things you need to work on. That being said, I am willing to start training you on defense skills. And eventually, attacking as well. Both with weapons and in hand-to-hand combat." Astrid's eyes started to widen before she was able to compose herself. Of all the things she thought he would do to try to mend things with Zephyr, this was not even close to something she imagined. And when she stole another glance at Zephyr, she could see her eyes were widening with surprise as well, no matter how hard she tried to keep her face stoic. "I'll even have each of the former riders work with you one-on-one if they are willing, so you get a wide range of instruction. And hopefully, we'll be able to pinpoint your strengths and your weaknesses." He paused to take in her reaction before adding, "If you want to, of course." Zephyr froze as she reached for the words to answer. "Wait, are you serious?" she slowly asked. "You'll really teach me? Like, actually teach me to fight?" "To defend," he quickly corrected. "And we'll go from there. On one condition." Zephyr nodded with uncertainty. "Until you've proven to me, your mother, and anyone that agrees to teach you that you have mastered the skills you need to join us in any sort of fight, defense, or anything that we are faced with, you follow my every command to the letter. No arguing, no talking back, no questioning. And if you can prove to me that you can do all of that, then we'll discuss how you can be more involved. If and when you prove that you can do all of that." "Understood." Zephyr stared at Hiccup in shock, searching his face as if looking for signs that he didn't really mean the promise he was giving her. But when she was satisfied enough with what she saw, she slowly nodded. "Okay." Hiccup mirrored her nod. "All right. Let me make sure everything is settled enough with the wing maidens, and then we can start in a few days." "Deal." "Deal," Zephyr softly replied, still hugging her stomach. "Okay." Hiccup gestured to the stairs with his head. "You can go ahead with what you were doing if you want." Zephyr nodded silently and started back up the stairs again. Astrid cleared her throat, she hadn't realized she was choking back tears. Damn, baby mood swings were already getting to her. "Oh, hey, Zeph," she called after her daughter. "If you see nothing, tell him I need to talk to him. I'm not necessarily mad he tied some leather around a falcon, but I definitely want to know how he managed to snag it." "Wait, what?" Zephyr's footsteps froze for a moment before they heard them tapping back down the stairs quickly. She poked her head around the corner. "Wait, what do you mean?" "I saw a falcon right outside the door in a tree with some leather tied to its stomach. And I know it was nothing, because no one else on this island would even think to do something like that. Let alone have the determination to go through with it." Zephyr's eyes narrowed slightly. "What color was the falcon?" Astrid raised an eyebrow. "White." Zephyr's eyes flew wide open and she looked at the front door before bolting through it. Hiccup and Astrid followed her with their eyes as she ran, not moving until they heard the door swing shut again behind her. After another moment of silence, Astrid asked, "So, do you know what that was about?" Hiccup shook his head. "Nope. Not a clue." "Should we be worried?" Hiccup pondered for a moment. "Probably not." Astrid pondered for a moment as well. "Agree to pretend nothing happened unless we hear about it again later from someone else." Hiccup nodded. Sounds good to me. Astrid bit her lip. Are you okay? That couldn't have been easy for you. Hiccup didn't need to ask what she was referring to. He stayed quiet, fiddling with the yak chops that didn't need fiddling with for a while. Astrid let him gather his thoughts as she chopped the vegetables smaller than they already were. Eventually, he started speaking quietly. I was talking to Gobber earlier in the forge today. I told him what happened with Zephyr and that I was terrified of something happening to her, because she didn't have the skills she needed to defend herself. And I thought he was going to lecture me and tell me that I shouldn't be so hard on her and blah blah blah. But he didn't. Hiccup chuckled softly. Actually, he told me that he remembered having a very similar conversation with my dad about me. That dad had told him he didn't know what to do with me because I was so different from the other kids, but I was still so stubborn and determined to do what they were doing. You know what Gobber told him? What's that? Astrid asked quietly, knowing he didn't need an answer but still wanting to assure him she was listening closely. Hiccup laughed incredulously. He said, put him in training with the others. Gobber's the reason Dad finally agreed to put me in dragon training. He told my dad that I was stubborn enough to do what I wanted no matter what. That I was going to go do the things he always told me I shouldn't because I had to show my worth. So he said that if Dad couldn't stop me, he might as well prepare me. Hiccup sighed. And I know Zephyr is every bit as stubborn as I was. Thank the gods it's in slightly more productive ways, but still. So, if I can't stop her, I might as well prepare her. Hiccup let his hands still, laying them on the table in front of him. Astrid put down her knife and grabbed one of his hands. It's good advice, she reassured him. Hiccup shook his head. It doesn't feel right. He sniffed. I mean, I feel like I'm just handing her over willingly to whatever dangers are coming our way. And I don't even know what those dangers are. But if you start now, then at least she'll be able to protect herself when they do get here. She cupped his cheek and turned his head towards her, letting him rest his forehead against hers. You can't protect her forever. Hiccup chuckled sadly. I can damn well try. Astrid smiled. I know, love. Hiccup sighed. I just want to hug her. And say sorry. But she has to know, right? She has to know she's gotta be more careful. Yes, she does. You're doing the best you can for her, love. The front door suddenly slammed open, making Astrid and Hiccup jump. Zephyr ran past the room before skidding to a stop and retreating far enough to look Astrid in the eye. She looked like she was holding leather in her right hand. Don't bother nothing about the whole bird thing, I got it covered. Night, love you. And with that, she ran back up the stairs. Hiccup sighed. So, still pretending nothing happened. Astrid nodded. Sure, sounds good enough to me. Chapter 14, Ally in Trouble. Notes. Hello my lovely readers. Welcome back. And thank you all so much for being so understanding and supportive with the last minute posting schedule change. Y'all are absolutely fantastic. Thanks to my awesome beta permanent guest as always for your incredible input this week. And welcome to Mr. Crocodile to my beta team, who helped a hell of a lot with this chapter too. Fair warning, this is the first chapter where that mature rating and some of those tags really come into play. Enjoy. Asterisk 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 TW, graphic depictions of violence, combat, and death, adult language asterisk asterisk asterisk. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Ethan didn't do well with conflict. It was something he always struggled with, and something he knew he would have to overcome eventually. Most people on Outcast Island knew this, especially Alvin. It was the reason why his father had torn the village to shreds over spreading rumors and criticizing Ethan's place in the village during a meeting when Ethan was 12. Alvin had always done everything in his power to protect Ethan. Ethan knew it was how his father showed his love. He fell back into his bed and rubbed his eyes. It had been a rough day, and he was excited to sleep for as long as his dad would let him. In the 2 weeks since Zephyr's announcement celebration, things had been a little strange around Outcast Island. The sail back alone was nearly a week, but once they did finally return to Outcast and news of the Haddock successor spread, people started talking about Alvin's successor too. Again. Apparently the shock of the haddock announcement overshadowed that memory of the public beratement enough to get people talking again. Ethan wasn't sure how he felt about all that. He was older now, and more accepted by the tribe than he used to be. The older he grew, the more he resembled his father, which meant the rest of the tribe gradually began to accept that he truly was an outcast, whether his mother had been or not. Which, admittedly, put him in a better position in his tribe than Zephyr was with hers. But they still loved to gossip, which didn't make things any easier for Ethan. He sighed. Yes, he knew he didn't do well with conflict. But today was not the day to overcome that. So instead, he distracted himself by focusing on the words he had sent in the letter to Zephyr. Zephyr. Hopefully Orboda finds you on her first try. Your island is only the second that I've tried to train her to deliver letters to, so I'm still not sure if the way I trained her worked or not. If she does make it back to you though, please give her a day or two to rest and explore the island. She'll come back to you once she finds you, so don't worry about letting her roam. She's just looking for food. I also wanted to apologize. I know the gift I gave you was unexpected, but I didn't mean anything by it. I just wanted to show you that I didn't mean you any harm and that I meant what I said at the treaty signing. You would be an incredible ally and an even better chiefess. I don't mean you any harm. If Orboda makes it back to you, please send her back with a letter answering this question so that I know it's you. What happened after the treaty signing? Ethan. He had sent Orboda to Newburgh with it a few days ago and was expecting her back anytime with Zephyr's response. Well, hopefully, at least. Assuming his training worked well enough. He just hoped the letter wasn't too. Ethan sighed. He just hoped the letter didn't make things worse. He groaned and scrubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. Well, this wasn't helping his state of mind. Rough day, a gruff voice asked from part way up the loft stairs. Ethan jumped and sat straight up in bed, turning to find his father staring curiously at him with one eyebrow raised. He raised his hands in surrender. Just your old man, son. He turned with a groan and started walking back down the stairs with a bit of effort. Ethan sighed. Well, the old part is definitely showing, he muttered sarcastically to himself. What was that? Alvin asked over his shoulder. I just said sorry, Dad. I guess I was pretty lost in my thoughts. Haddock girl again. Alvin huffed between groans. His knees must have been bothering him again. Although, his right hip had been giving him a lot of trouble as well. Ethan pulled himself out of bed and followed his father down the remaining stairs. Oh, just worried if Bodhi made it to Newburgh or not. First trip on her own, and all. Alvin huffed a chuckle. Skipped over the haddock girl, I see. Ethan rolled his eyes. Sit down, old man. I'll bring you some stew. Yeah, Alvin waved him off, but he was smiling when he sat down. I'm telling ya, son, if you don't make your move now, you'll regret it. Ethan chuckled and rolled his eyes as he turned his back to his father, stirring the stew that was gently boiling over the fire. I don't know what you're talking about, he sighed. Alvin huffed a chuckle. Deny it all ye want, you're not hiding anything from me. Ethan heard the chair groan as Alvin settled into it and sighed. Maybe if I hadn't waited so long with your mother, she'd still be with us. Ethan quietly scooped some stew into 2 bowls as his father's words sank in. Suddenly, he desperately wanted to sail back to Newburgh. For unrelated reasons, of course. Entirely separate from this conversation. But as he bit his lip and turned to gently hand the steaming bowl to his father and fetch a spoon, he couldn't help quietly asking, "Why do you say that?" Alvin shrugged and started slurping the broth from his bowl like a large cup. He audibly swallowed, and Ethan shook his head as he laughed internally and slid the spoon into his own bowl instead, waiting for Alvin to continue. Alvin smacked his lips for a moment while he collected his thoughts. I dunno. She woulda been younger, probably woulda handled things better. Woulda had more time to plan and get things ready. Point is, you need to learn from my mistakes. No sense making the same ones that have already been made. Ethan smiled teasingly as his father over his bowl of stew. Hard to do when you don't tell me what they were. For he rolled his shoulders and drank more of his stew. He chewed the vegetables and swallowed before saying, "Always remember, son, a man should never sail alone." Alvin swallowed the rest of his bowl and held it out to Ethan. "Fill me up again, would ye?" "Sure, Dad." Ethan took his bowl and scooped him another serving. "A man should never sail alone." Ethan shivered. He almost didn't want to ask what his father meant with that advice. Or, more importantly, how it was related to his mother. They ate the rest of their meals in silence, as was typical when Ethan's mother came up in conversation. It was always a heavy silence that meant different things to them, but carried the same kind of somber energy. Still, it didn't make the silence any more comfortable between them, sometimes it made things even worse. Not long after, Ethan couldn't handle the